год закончили, можно сказать, хорошо. Финансово тоже хорошо. Мы там вышли примерно на 195 миллионов евро выручки и почти 80 миллионов евро EBITDA. Выплатили 4,4 миллиарда рублей дивидендов. Значит, ну, в общем, все по плану, да, по городским циклам радиотерапии, лучевая терапия. Мы в прошлом году сделали 2500 квот. Это, хотя в начале года ожидали 1000 квот, да, но просто город добавил по ходу развития.
Просто за деньги нет этой услуги? Просто за деньги коммерческие нет услуги? Все по квоте?
Не, есть коммерческие, но это там, условно, 10%. Да?
Ага.
Значит, единственное, что есть задержка со строительством 63-й больницы, потому что на 3 месяца была остановлена стройка во время чемпионата мира по футболу. Вот. Ну и плюс, так как делают все это, скажем так, максимально быстро, максимально эффективно, да, то есть не дожидаясь там полностью готового проекта и так далее, есть какие-то изменения по пути. Вот, соответственно, нынешние ожидания по вводу 63-й – это в мае закончить стройку, плюс лицензирование в июне ее запустить. Да? Это уже кажется плюс-минус реальным. Вот. Но в то же время, как показала практика, да, то есть мы в прошлом году сделали 2500 циклов лучевой терапии на 3 лучевых ускорителях. Причем 3-й был введен в строй только в июле. Значит, дальше из негатива. То есть у нас был очень такой оптимистичный и радужный план буквально по состоянию на неделю тому назад, на 2019 год. Да? То есть план был достичь 250 миллионов евро выручки и получить 105, а то и там, может, 110 миллионов евро, ну, 105 миллионов евро EBITDA. Это было в бюджете по состоянию на конец года. Это предполагало 7500 квот городских по лучевой терапии, и из которых примерно половина идет по высокому тарифу. Там есть, ну, в зависимости от типа лечения, да, от показаний. Есть дорогой тариф 513 тысяч рублей за цикл лучевой терапии. Есть дешевый тариф 260 тысяч рублей. Значит, 260 тысяч – это федеральный тариф, он уже утвержден. А 513 – это была доплата города за ряд дорогих тарифов. Город в начале года, выйдя с каникул, сказал: а не будем мы пока тратить деньги, все, в общем, пусть идут по дешевому тарифу, 260 тысяч. Вот, соответственно, сейчас CFO перечитывает бюджет, но выглядит так, что мы с этими цифрами мы выйдем где-то, наверное, на 90 миллионов евро EBITDA по этому году. Но при этом есть какая-то implied optionality, да, потому что есть Шилов, который ходит в мэрию. Вот, ну и, собственно, будет 63-я больница, да, будет capacity, то есть есть вероятность, что где-то в середине года что-то поменяется. Да?
То есть это где-то 5 миллионов евро недобор?
Нет, это где-то под 15. Под 15. Мы планировали это под 105 миллионов евро.
109 миллионов долларов у нас было... 112 миллионов долларов.
Ну, да.
100 миллионов.
Да, в общем, ну или там 12 миллионов, может, 15-12 миллионов. Значит, ну, собственно, Шилов считает, что, может немного оптимистично, но считает, что получится договориться и выбрать весь бюджет, заложенный изначально в абсолютном выражении, да, весь бюджет городской на лучевую терапию. Просто, вероятно, будет чуть больше расхода, так как вот эта вот более низкая технология, по которой там тариф 260 тысяч, предполагает чуть больше затрат. Да? Но будем смотреть. Да? То есть, собственно, вот такой план. Значит, с точки зрения наших shareholder plans, Из таких immediate мы ведем разговор с Credit Suisse там, на стадии термшита, обсуждения термшита по поводу рекапа. Credit Suisse сказал, что могут дать 80 миллионов евро по ставке там, около 3% в евро. Шилов, в принципе, заинтересован, поэтому начали обсуждение, ну, посмотрим, куда заведет. В принципе, если у Credit Suisse останется как бы желание двигаться вперед, да, если никуда не исчезнет, да, то, в принципе, не кажется, что там есть какие-то такие дикие барьеры. Соответственно, я думаю, что через, ну, в течение месяца у нас будет понимание, есть эта сделка или нет, и, соответственно, там, может, еще там месяц, полтора-два на то, чтобы ее доделать, документировать. Вторая тема IPO. Значит, на следующей неделе у нас консилиум с нашими банками, андеррайтерами для того, чтобы обсудить план, понять, что есть на рынке. К сожалению, цены на наших ближайших peers, мать и дитя, там около или чуть выше $4 за акцию, хотя еще 6 месяцев тому было около 10, да, за это время съехало очень сильно. На фоне невыполнения плана, плюс как бы low liquidity, соответственно, когда там часть фонда начали распродавать MDMG в конце года, цена как бы упала там с $7 до 4. И турецкий peer MLP тоже там большой рекавери, ну там совсем небольшой рекавери, да, ну там торгуется что около 7 раз, поэтому 7 раз и беда, поэтому немного не радует это, да. Вот, соответственно, мы решим, опять же, на фоне как бы наших планов по лучевой терапии, да, когда будет некая ясность. Да.
Мы понимаем аналитически, в связи с чем, но я понимаю, что в Турции есть своя особая проблема, но все-таки, если хорошая компания, даже в Турции она должна торговаться нормально. Почему?
Ну, значит, мы понимаем, почему она упала, да? Мы пока не понимаем, почему нет сильной рекавери. Да? Упала просто на фоне двух вещей. Да? То есть вышли они буквально год тому назад, да, в начале февраля, по оценке 10.3 или 4 раза EBITDA. Значит, это 2018 года. Буквально там через 3 или 4 месяца разразился этот турецкий кризис и отток денег, и акция упала там что-то типа там на 40% по сравнению с IPO прайс.
У нее там прайс в лирах,
у них, да,
индикатор же не должен
да,
быть.
у них в чем дело? У них выручка практически вся в лирах, да, и большая часть этой тоже, ну, турецкой ОМС, да, национальное страхование. Долг примерно 2,5 раз debt to EBITDA, практически весь валютный. И аренда практически вся валютная. Да, поэтому там есть определенные ножницы из-за девальвации лиры, есть снижение EBITDA. Но не такое ужасное, да, то есть это не straightforward просто снижение.
Просто в этом бизнесе это PE 9, да? Совсем мало. Да,
совсем мало, да. При этом банки говорят, ну, те, кто как бы MLP знает, что говорят, отличная компания, операционно все прекрасно. Есть валютные ножницы, но не ужасные, да, то есть не 6 раз там debt to EBITDA. Вот, но пока recovery такой нет, да. Вот, соответственно, мы будем смотреть и принимать решение, пытаемся ли мы поймать это окно там май, ну или там июнь, начало июля на IPO, да, либо нам просто на фоне как бы наших операционных вопросов и 63-й стоит отложить все там до осени. Да? Ну, понятно, что нам интереснее, как бы, если есть адекватная цена, нам интереснее это сделать в июне. Да?
А почему вы тогда турецкую компанию здесь как peer не показываете?
Да, я скажу, я себе записал, да, потому что здесь на самом деле как бы нет MLP, нет NMC, да, их надо показывать. Да.
IHH, да, как IHH?
IHH это как это крем де ля крем, 20 раз EBITDA, да, То есть можно показать, но просто...
Не считаю, что мы крем для крем.
Мы крем для крем, да, но просто я имею в виду не в глобальном плане, да. Просто IHH, ну, IHH прекрасная компания, да, просто с точки зрения...
Надо смотреть на бизнес-модель. Ну, как бы, слушай, мы выводили Яндекс эти по глобальным мультипликаторам, почему мы здесь не показываем?
IHH прекрасная компания, абсолютно, да, просто с точки зрения прямого сравнения по мультипликаторам, к сожалению...
Надо понять, почему они столько стоят, и надо понять, почему мы должны стоить дорого, а не потому, что мы там в России, как в Турции, должны стоить.
Сколько?
Ни на кого.
Point taken, да. IHH, MLP и...
EBITDA в раз лучше, чем все.
Да. 2,5, почти в 3. И на следующей неделе встреча с Шиловым, также будем обсуждать как бы другие наши трекс, возможность сделки с Харитониным, MDMG, РФПИ, вот, и при этом начну разговор по поводу того, что может быть просто speed up our exit, да, то есть если раньше была такая парадигма более прората, да, то сейчас просто говорить о том,
Можно предложить там реально как бы deep dive на consumer retail и VMC с точки зрения бизнес-модели, по сравнению с другими peers.
Ой,
Flawless по всему остальному. Ладно?
договорились.
Штат. У нас очень хорошая компания.
Согласен.
На уровне и там Тинькова, Яндекса, Авито и все остальное.
Согласен.
Мы не должны на нее смотреть как на какой-то дисконт от турков. При всем уважении.
В какой стадии это региональные проекты на это, там, сети и linear accelerators и так далее?
Какой проект, Мак, извини?
Это региональные проекты, да? Вот,
Да, региональные, значит, у нас была договоренность с двумя регионами или с двумя городами по поводу онкологии. Дальше смена губернаторов. А сейчас, да, и, соответственно, они теперь ждут подтверждения, сколько денег будет выделено на региональные госпрограммы. И, соответственно, будут эти деньги выделены на строительство каких-то новых больниц, либо на оплату услуг. Значит, и то есть это пока что в таком состоянии не замороженном, да, в состоянии как бы, то есть Шилов и Яновский ездят, общаются, и, наверное, ясность будет в течение, там, наверное, 2 месяцев по поводу этих регионов. То есть у нас сейчас в работе, там, наверное, 3 или 4 региона. Будет ясность по поводу того, сколько денег выделено и на что. Да? То есть если это оплата услуг, то наша региональная онкологическая программа возобновляется, да, и мы начинаем стройку.
Можно показывать отдельно либо в райтапе, либо в таблице долю доходов от государства?
Да. Угу. Ну и плюс мы будем отдельно показывать также фокус долю рублевых доходов, потому что они становятся, ну это по сути государство плюс наша senior care, да, потому что они становятся уже sizable.
выполнение плана 19-20 год зависит большинство от чего?
Зависит большинство от желания города, ну пока что города, да, но потом плюс регионов, тратить деньги на оплату услуг, да, то есть есть
Государственные программы, да?
Есть фундаментальная потребность в современной онкологии, да, просто город увеличивает количество квот постепенно. Не
Сколько
так.
доля выручки от онкологии по всей выручке компании сейчас?
Включая радиотерапию, где-то, сейчас скажу, где-то примерно под...
Включая лучевую терапию?
Да, ну где-то там под 35% уже. Ну,
то есть материально?
По этому году, да, это материально. Да, даже, да, ну, так. Угу.
Почему у нас так gross margin вырос?
Почему?
Gross margin в связи с чем вырос?
Потому что радиотерапия и ПЭТ-КТ, диагностика, да, это высокомаржинальный продукт, да, где есть большой капекс на входе.
С бюджетом?
По прошлому году. Ну, собственно, потому что сделали больше квот, да, у нас изначально было 1000 квот, сделали 2500 квот, да. И
То есть не до этого,
точнее, там еще одна вещь была, да, то есть первое это вот больше квот по радиотерапии. Это высокомаржинальная вещь. Вторая – это в течение года были определенные валютные ножницы, да, когда, ну, там, сколько там, они были?
Рублевая зарплата.
4. У нас ну, зарплата, опять же, больше привязана к выручке, так или иначе, ну, либо да? Вот, но большая часть других расходов это рубли. Да? И, соответственно, был такой...
There's something strange about the accounting here anyway, because gross profit and EBITDA are basically the same. There must be some fixed costs or other things that
Надо проверить, да. Sorry,
it's probably just the difference between our format and theirs, and so the numbers are...
Немножко не так. Да. Это не так.
So it's most of the growth depends on government programs. I thought we were mostly driven by private sector demand.
То есть, смотри, наш коммерческий сегмент растет, ну, такие low teens в евро, да?
And we have regular private hospitals that we're planning to open as well, or is it mostly just these?
Пока что, ну, то есть у нас открыто, мы запустили эту реабилитацию, большой центр реабилитации в декабре, да? И пока что новый capacity addition мы не планируем, кроме как расширение стационара внутри Щепкина, то есть там часть они доращивают хозяйственные площади, и часть делают там VIP-стационар и увеличивают количество коек, да, там в этом году добавим где-то, наверное, 20-25 коек в стационаре на Щепкин.
Ну, 63 это будет целиком ОМС, или нет?
Первая стадия целиком ОМС, да, то есть там большая потенциальная площадь, да, первая фаза это 12 или 12,5 тысяч метров, вот, но можно строить еще там вплоть еще 60 тысяч метров. Да.
Но у нас пока на как бы средний сегмент мы пока не научились работать, Солнцево пока не заработало.
Солнцево скорее как поиск, во что его конвертировать, да? Вероятно, в онкологический диспансер под госпрограмму.
Почему? То есть общее...
Ну, просто, ну,
интересно по маржинальности.
Две вещи, да, то есть две вещи. То есть первое, понимание, что на самом деле как бы sensitivity по цене в среднем сегменте очень высокая, да, и люди при выборе там заплатить 2500 рублей, 3000 рублей, да, либо пойти просто в любой там какой-то локальный кабинет, заплатить там 1000 или 1500 рублей, это выбирает более дешевый сегмент, несмотря на то, что Солнцево прекрасная, там, красивая, хорошо оборудованная клиника и так далее. Да. Второе, это то, что изначально была ошибка сделана, то, что идти в средний сегмент с, скажем, таким дорогим менеджментом и с дорогим менталити, да, то есть когда приходит AMC, приходит, и опять же, то есть нужно в дорогом сегменте делать совершенно другой, как менеджмент-тим и врачебную команду. Вот. Когда ты пытаешься это сделать по дорогим стандартам с точки зрения расходов, да, по дорогим стандартам, протоколам, с дорогими врачами и так далее, да, пытаясь экстраполировать некую практику МСишную, да, и пытаешься наложить на это выручку среднего ценового сегмента, все это не работает. Да. Вот. Андрей потом уже пытался и пытается как бы все сократить, сократил площади, сократил врачей, начал более врачей, вот, но все это тяжело.
Графа нужна для...
Только хотел сказать.
А насколько... Да, предлагаю купить семейный доктор для размера IPO.
Да.
А сколько у нас
Угробить.
Лучше переманить Графова.
Нет, не надо. Sustainable маржа на ОМС. И кто еще строит подобные facilities для конкуренции по ОМС?
Значит, строит еще Ройберг в Химках. центр, да, но он, правда, еще, я так понимаю, еще год-полтора. Да? Дальше что-то строит Харитонин, и у Харитонина есть, ну, есть ПЭТ-КТ-диагностика, но, правда, не в Москве, а в области. Есть, да, ну и Харитонин смотрит на несколько государственных больниц, где он может поставить лучевые ускорители. Есть несколько государственных клиник с лучевыми ускорителями. Да? То есть пока что государство не снижает тариф, да? То есть пока что речь идет скорее о повышении тарифа. Да? Ну, или, скажем так, о большей дифференциации тарифа.
Там реально есть вот нормальный тендерный процесс, где там как бы конкурируют несколько предложений.
Но они конкурируют за квоты, да, то есть они сейчас все как бы радуются тарифу, да, и наоборот все хотят, чтобы тариф повысили, да. Последний комментарий Шилова — это то, что вот госпожа Ракова, которая стала министром Москвы по здравоохранению, да, она как раз хочет сделать более дифференцированный тариф, да, там 260 тысяч, там 350, 450, 500, в зависимости от сложности кейса и от технологии использования. Да. Сделают это или не сделают, ну, Шилов считает, что за этот год это должны проработать, и будет понятно, будет, не будет. Да, ну.
Не очень понятно, почему у нас по ОМС должна быть маржа больше, чем по коммерческой, если в долгосрочной перспективе.
Я думаю, что надо смотреть больше как бы не только на маржу, надо смотреть на возврат на инвестиции как бы с точки зрения капекса, да, и роик, да, потому что
Мы там тоже вроде инвестируем, или ты имеешь в виду 63?
Просто лучевые ускорители изнашиваются там, условно, за 6-7 лет. 6-7 лет тебе нужно либо делать полную модернизацию, либо просто покупать новый. Скорее всего, покупать новый просто потому, что
Ну, тогда в этом анализе просто понять, насколько нам переплачивают по ОМС в сравнении с тем, что мы получаем за те же самые услуги по коммерции.
У нас
Процентов 30-40.
не может быть ситуация, что другие игроки просто коррумпированные, там стоимость выхода.
Мы коррумпированные.
Я бы не говорил.
Таких слов нельзя говорить.
Ну, что у них капекс в него
Мы
заложено.
единственный, кто не коррумпированный.
В него заложена там двойная цена, поэтому...
Что Печатников возглавлял там медицину в Москве, это как бы не говорили.
То есть, понимаешь, что если, допустим, у конкурентов в капекс заложена двойная цена, то их тот тариф как бы едва ли окупает. А у нас, если мы там, я не знаю, просто думаю, как у нас это было? Если
Было бы позитивно.
Цена одинаковая для всех. Да?
на ускорителей.
Региональная цена одинаковая.
Ваня говорит, у них воруют настройки больше, чем у нас, поэтому им стоит это в 2 раза дороже.
Поэтому у нас маржа получается выше.
Цена не упадет.
Но тариф не от их себестоимости идет.
Почему? А тариф же лоббизм как-то рождается между, если они как бы
Мы
лоббируют.
лоббируем.
Мы тоже лоббируем, да. Мы тоже лоббируем.
Мы основные лоббисты.
Да.
Не основные. В регионах тоже есть.
Риск понятно, давайте мы там...
Там не только на радио все эти услуги повышенные тарифы ОМС, да, на все госпитализации. Тоже семейного доктора, да, очень говорили.
Да.
ОМСные тарифы на госпитальные услуги, они существенно выше, чем коммерческие рынки. Пока. Когда эта халява закончится,
Ну, опять
это
же, да,
вопрос.
то есть существенный вопрос к сравнению с сегментом. Да. В среднем
Да.
ценовом сегменте
Да.
они как бы достойные тарифы. Да, то есть, That's it.
Бензине продадим.
Costa, you may have said this, but I didn't hear or understand. So besides the IPO track, is Fosun still in the picture, or is it just the Haritonin idea that's
Да,
kind of...
Нет, с Фосном мы встречались в конце декабря, в самом конце декабря, дали им апдейт. Сейчас, значит, они ушли думать и обещали в январе вернуться, да, то есть сейчас будем с ними опять обсуждать, на что они готовы. Их последнее было видение, да, что, возможно, они поменяют подход, да, что их взгляд будет не full buyout, некой такой, как это pre-IPO partnership такой, да, то есть large или significant minority stake, да, либо это будет pre-IPO, либо это будет просто, ну, вообще, там, просто купить там 40%, да, и радоваться. Но помимо этого есть Харитонин, да, ну, правда, у него там, то ему очень интересно и готов платить там 9,5 раз EBITDA, или, ну, это последний был квоут, но потом исчез и сказал, что
Какой multiple?
9.5 times 2019 EBITDA, да. Но это было в начале декабря, но потом он исчез и, и не готов был разговаривать, да. Вот, но фундаментально ему тоже это интересно, поэтому разговоры еще будут.
Окей, спасибо.
Дальше. Сибирь.
In financial services. Столица. Ситуация с ПКБ хорошая. Компания завершила год выше планов и по объему покупок, и по перформансу основных сегментов. Напомню, у компании два основных бизнес-сегмента. Это debt purchase, где покупают акционные портфели, и агентский бизнес. Агентский бизнес работает на самоокупаемости, и мы как бы стратегически его не развиваем, а бизнес покупок активно растет, и в нем увеличивается маржинальность за счет развития судебного взыскания, лучшего скип-трейсинга, решения контактности и многочисленных операционных изменений, которые делаются там, изначально там, 15 стратегических проектов. Каждый нацелен на повышение какой-то из метрик, либо контактности, либо взыскания, либо продажи продуктов по реструктуризации задолженности. Все это привело к тому, что компания практически удвоила выручку с учетом переоценки в 2018 году, и мы планируем 30% рост на следующий год. Здесь важно отметить, что мы в этом последнем квартале завершили очень большой такой внутренний проект по изменению методологии расчета переоценки, которая начнет теперь как бы уменьшаться. То есть мы, условно, несмотря на рост операционных показателей, говорящих о том, что портфель стоит дороже, мы не будем его переоценивать вверх, чтобы не наращивать в будущем амортизацию этого портфеля. Иначе это создавало для нас ситуацию, что все эти операционные улучшения, которые мы делаем, мы считаем являются конечными, мы могли иметь возможность сильно переоценить портфель на математических моделях справедливо и как бы последовательно, как мы делали это раньше. Но поскольку этот портфель амортизируется во времени, амортизация заходит в выручку будущих периодов, мы получали как бы негативную динамику по чистой прибыли за счет просто вот этого счетного компонента. И поэтому сейчас я комментирую к тому, что 8,3 миллиарда, которые мы планируем на следующий год, не совсем как бы правильно сравнивать с 6 миллиардами выручки в этом году, потому что в этом году у нас условно 100% переоценки заходит, а в следующем только 30%. И далее будет 0. То есть компания как бы специально выработала такую модель для того, чтобы траектория роста по чистой прибыли была более стабильна и была постоянно растущей. В этом году чистая прибыль составит около 1,7 миллиардов рублей, и дальше она будет расти там 2-2,5 миллиарда. Все эти вещи на денежные потоки, реальный кэшфлоу, который входит, никак не влияют, это просто accounting presentation. И с точки зрения там, переговоров по рекапу, переговоров по потенциальной продаже бизнеса, все внешние инвесторы и заинтересованные покупатели смотрят именно на кэш и беду, поэтому для них это не является каким-то факторы там, неопределенности или того, чтобы что-то их смущало. Мы очень рады, что ПКБ в этом году сумели переломить тенденцию, которая у них была в прошлом периоде по снижению объема покупок. У нас был отдельный внутренний проект, чтобы ситуацию исправить. Потому что, напомню, компания стабильно зарабатывала примерно 3,2 раза на сделанные инвестиции, кэш-он-кэш. Но рынок в прошлом году стал снижаться, примерно на треть он уменьшился в 2017 году. И доля рынка ПКБ еще больше снизилась в этом рынке. Вот в этом году эту ситуацию удалось переломить, и мы планируем, что в будущем примерно 25% рынка покупок Debt Purchase ПКБ будет стабильно поддерживать. Компании также удалось в конце года существенно диверсифицировать свой портфель фондирования. Мы уже писали, что это в июле была открыта кредитная линия с ВТБ. Она была по 11%. А я напомню, что у компании примерно 1,5 миллиарда облигаций, 15%, большая часть из которых держал Банк Восточный. И это, в принципе, компания очень хорошо перформит, но с любым внешним контрагентом, даже когда возникала тема рекапа, переговоров с банками, это всегда вызывало вопросы какой-то аффилированности, каких-то там взаимоотношений. Что ПКБ сумели, во-первых, нарастить линию с ВТБ до 800 миллионов, а во-вторых, еще 500 миллионов договориться о переразмещении облигаций с БКС. Таким образом, доля Восточного теперь в портфеле источников фондирования компании будет ниже миллиарда. И, в общем, мы думаем, что это достаточно комфортный уровень, на котором все и стабилизируется. На этом фоне мы ждем, мы разослали, Игорь помогает нам, спасибо, мы разослали тизеры в банке по переговорам по рекапу и ждем какой-то обратной связи, с кем из банков будет более предметно разговаривать. Перформанс у компании очень хороший, внутренняя траектория тоже стабильная, и поэтому мы надеемся, что это будет хороший кандидат для такой сделки. Все вопросы с менеджментом в компании в этом году окончательно утвердились. Есть хорошо слаженная команда из топ-3 менеджеров, между которыми разделяются основные полномочия. Мы по-прежнему много времени уделяем тому, чтобы выстраивать отношения с Сергеем Власовым, который председатель совета директоров и довольно часто вмешивается в операционные вещи и очень, иногда бывает очень с хорошими идеями, но очень деструктивной коммуникация этих идей может приводить к тому, что люди чувствуют, что их лишают возможности нести ответственность за проекты, которые они развивают. Вот. Но это с чем мы уже более-менее сработались, и мы планируем дальше это находить какую-то тонкую границу, чтобы идеи воспринимать, но damage control такое ограничивать. По лоббированию у нас есть запланированные изменения, которые входят в весеннюю сессию. Там нанят ЕПАМ, разработаны изменения законодательства, они прошли какие-то комитеты, и в весеннюю сессию они должны быть уже в законодательном органе. Но мы на это не входит ни в какие бюджеты и планы, но если в этом действительно будет какое-то успешное продвижение, это будет еще один такой big change позитивный для бизнес-компании, потому что позволит расширить несколько узких мест в работе с частными приставами и повышением контактности клиентской базы.
А в чем суть этих изменений законодательства? Коротко.
Коротко, там два изменения. Первое – это развитие службы частных судебных приставов. В России это государственная система, а во многих восточноевропейских странах, типа Польши, Чехии, это есть частная служба. ПКБ занимается тем, что они покупают долги очень дешево, 80-90% долга списывается, а остальные 10, 15, 20 как-то реструктурируются некими платежами. Платежи получаются маленькие. И государственным приставам заниматься вот этой мелочью совершенно нет никакого интереса. Они все время оказываются в последней очереди. Поэтому мы имеем такую проблему того, что как-то взаимоотношения с клиентами проходят только через них после получения судебных решений. Мы оказываемся в такой neglected ситуации. Частный бизнес, если бы он в это зашел, он был на рыночных основаниях эту ситуацию исправил. А вторая инициатива связана с подключением компании к системе межведомственного электронного документооборота. Это установленная в российском государстве система обмена между банками, министерствами, ведомствами, госуслугами и всеми этими инфраструктурой, которые ПКБ сейчас, хотя является держателем портфелей, задолженности и так далее, прямого доступа не имеет. Там иногда что-то получается сделать через кого-то, это всегда носит какой-то серый характер. Вот, а сделать его легитимным, прямолинейным и четким позволило бы получать более качественные данные и повысить контактность работы.
А ты считаешь, вот эти две инициативы, они насколько могут апсайд бизнеса изменить?
Каждый из них может увеличить. У нас сейчас там, грубо говоря, мы покупаем за 11 с небольшим процента, взыскиваем 3,5%. Каждый из них может там, добавить примерно 2-3% на сумму взыска. Вместе они точно могут удвоить collection rate. То есть это прям big change, если они произойдут.
Аня, какой кэш ревеню и кэш EBITDA, и какая вообще маржинальность в бизнесе? Потому что с Revaluation вообще непонятно, как это...
У тебя cashflow from operations почти вся.
Да, это практически вот cashflow from operations у нас...
Ну, это net income.
Нет, почему?
Нет, это весь кэш, который здесь, это весь кэш, который остался в компании после покупок. В этом кэше сидит примерно 1 100 000 000 покупок, и все остальное, это есть чистый денежный поток.
We are almost planning to double the cash collected this year compared to last year, and the effect of the new purchase made in 2018 is only 1/3 of that. So, I think we moved to a situation where PKB is really like a cash machine now.
Cash machine, yeah.
And in 2 years' time, I think we will stop to have reevaluation because we have the view that the exit will be made with let's say a strategic investor who will be immediately looking only at cash.
So when we're thinking about valuation, what's the metric we're looking at?
I think we need to look at cash EBITDA.
That's because it's immune to all revaluation, and all the strategic buyers are looking at cash EBITDA and remaining collection. They look at ERC also. It's like remaining collection in the portfolio.
Why don't we put cash EBITDA on this page then so we can track it?
Easy, of course.
In general, these numbers, I think, below the EBITDA line, they don't make a lot of sense. There's no reason why if the EBITDA margin would grow by 15% and the net income margin would fall by, it's even worse than this because the actual net income margin is higher in 2018 than what is shown here. So besides the amortization of portfolios, and if we're not paying dramatically more for portfolios, there shouldn't be anything to explain such a big difference. But let's put in cash EBITDA. I agree that's the best metric, and we can track that.
У тебя разве это не есть кэш EBITDA?
Да, это же кэш EBITDA с 18 и дальше, это из модели кэш EBITDA и есть.
This EBITDA is cash EBITDA?
I'm not sure about the past figures. I think the past it's not IFRS. So we are mixing in the same line cash and IFRS. So we need to have two different lines. It's easy. We have them. So we'll have IFRS EBITDA and cash EBITDA, and then we can track easily.
А что вы думаете по поводу экзита?
Мы предварительно начали общаться с европейскими игроками. Несколько уже было организованных встреч. И все они смотрят с большим-большим интересом, потому что последние 2 года они активно инвестировали в Южной Европе, в Греции, в Испании много инвестиций и сделок. И мы понимаем, что маржинальность, которую они там зарабатывают, то есть там несколько раз выше, чем которые зарабатывают КБ, и это видно в цифрах. Поэтому интерес есть.
So let's start by the beginning. I think we don't see any obvious Russian buyer. We don't think that an IPO would be easy. Da Vinci has a slightly different view, but IPO could only be a technical IPO with pension fund, and because it's a cash flow business, could be interesting for them, but it will be complex to explain. And collection business has not immediately good reputation. So it's not so easy, basically, for an IPO. So our main path is really to focus on a strategic buyer. You have more and more concentration in Europe. Best players are based in UK, Poland, and Scandinavia. I think now we have we have met, I would say, 8 out of the top 10 at C-level situation. We want to be on their radar screen. Half of them have just a no-go policy on Russia because of the macro. This may change because managements are changing the macro. I'm not sure it will change, but at least the view from the board and the management may change. What we feel is all the debt collection companies were focusing on Spain and Italy a few years ago. Last year, Greece was the hot topic, but in Greece you have only 4 banks, and quite quickly they have grabbed the juicy business. So they will have to look for a new country, new expansion. Turkey was one of the routes for them, but now Turkey is a very complex country also. So one of the debt collection companies stopped their IPO process. So we believe that Russia could be the next country for them. And also we need to highlight that we compete with international players. The number 2 on the market is EOS, German-based debt collection company. And the third one is called Credit Express, but it's owned by a Scandinavian private company called Svea Economy. So we want really to develop the relationship. We think we have a lot of value to extract this year. And we have revised positively our view on the future of the company because now we are buying portfolio and we are still buying cheap, basically 2%, 3%. So that's the view on exit. I think the timing is for us to give a mandate at the end of this year to an investment bank. We will have the choice between one of the large one. You have 2 basically with specialized guys on debt collection. Goldman Sachs is one of them. We are now in contact with the right team based in London, and boutique investment bankers. We know one in Stockholm, one in the UK. So the plan for this year is really to be visible, to attend for the CEO to attend some conferences with investors, for us together with the CEO to meet again all the top guys from the, let's say, top 15 debt collection companies, and to tell the story. Each time we put the story on the table, the numbers and the profitability is very different from what they have in different countries, so they immediately see some value for them.
А почему с банками банкомат не интересно? Российский.
Sberbank we don't believe that they will buy. Operation.
Открытие would have bought it. They're buying every specialty finance business, but I think everyone sees what happened to Открытие, so I think appetite from banks for creative M&A outside of their core banking is very low now.
А с точки зрения стратегических покупателей, там, европейских, например, им интересно, может ли это быть им интересно с точки зрения технологии, управления, для того, чтобы это как-то на существующие страны?
We don't feel we have a huge difference in terms of technology between them and us now. So I think we are quite advanced, but they are also quite advanced. So we try to tease them with. I think we are better advanced on robots that are calling the client. So each time we do a demo, it's quite impressive for them. But honestly, I don't think we can position the company as you will gain technology. So it's more all the financials. I mean, the cash collected for the amount paid is we have 1 to 5 basically difference.
Почему у нас прибыльность настолько выше, чем у...
Каждый из 14 этих стратегических проектов там добавил по процентику какому-нибудь collection rate.
Фундаментально просто. Почему Россия против европейских биржевых?
У тебя просто может быть, что стоимость портфеля сейчас там не sustainable, да? Если у тебя контактность растет, собираемость растет, то портфель подорожает.
Of course, but then our collection should go. We're sitting on a portfolio of $6 billion. So in Europe, let's say the worst markets in Europe, people pay 20% for portfolios and they collect 50%. And so we're paying 1% and collecting 3.5%.
No, we were also expecting in the past price to go up, and they are not really up. So I think competition is also reducing on the market. So we have, I think we put in the write-up, we have two players basically leaving the market. Incasso, which is a small Polish operation. Alpha is leaving with Sentinel. So they are taking
10% maybe.
They are taking inside their own collection, but they had a small party for third party collection, and it's going to be for sale. So we have an opportunistic view on that. It's rather small. It's let's say 500 to 1 billion. So we could buy them as a portfolio purchase basically. But you have less and less players, and the collection law has cleaned up the market. You don't have any cowboys like small boutiques, and so we really compete with the number 2 on the market is EOS. So same philosophy, same technology as us. The main difference is we have a field network. They don't have a field.
And so an obvious question is, if you have a foreign strategic who's already here, who's already probably seeing that this is a profitable market, why are they not interested in?
We don't think the two that are active there would buy us. I mean, why would they? I mean, they have already 10 to 15% market share. I'm not sure that in their plan they have like a view to be dominant on a tough market like Russia.
They have a completely different model. I don't think they have anything close to profitability we are having because they have no field network.
Ну, будет комплементарно, нет?
So in practice, yes, I don't think they're there yet. Geopolitically, investing $300 million in Russia in a deal, I don't see us doing that yet. But they accumulate a lot of portfolios and they outsource them actually. So I think that their profitability numbers don't look as impressive as ours. You are asking about kind of competitive edges. One of the edges was that the company used to have 300 people in the fields, making connections and talking. Now we are over 1,000. We're going to be over 2,000 next year.
Yeah. The main problem that we'll face for an exit with a European debt collection agency is most of them have high leverage. So their debt level is really 6 times EBITDA. I'm talking about cash EBITDA. So it's rather high, and that could be an issue to make a deal. But the positive point is PKB has 0.5 net debt divided by EBITDA.
Yeah, we could do a deal for shares.
And that's the point. We want to be creative about the deal structure because most of them are listed, so liquidity could be there for us after a small lockup.
It does feel to me like we're underestimating the future EBITDA and earnings power. It's certainly based on these numbers, and that if we believe that there's a reasonable chance of any of these initiatives happening, then it could be not 20% higher, but times higher, and so.
Yeah, but we cannot put them in the numbers. It's really black and white. Either the law will be really fantastic news for us or not. So it cannot be in the middle.
А у нас прибыльность улучшилась из-за того, что рыночная ситуация изменилась, или потому что мы внутренний процесс отладили?
Из-за того, что отладили процессы, выстроили судебное взыскание, выстроили field network, которая там была маленькая, стала большой, сделали продукты. До этого стратегия была, приходит и говорит, заплати мне все. Сейчас он приходит и говорит, мы тебе там, вот коробочка, в ней там все уже организовано, тебе нужно там, и там целый гейминг сделан. Там, если ты платишь, тебе следующий прощают. Если ты там буквально там за все действия что-то получается. И вот это превратилось из переговоров о взыскании в продажу продукта. Это как бы лучше работает. Люди платят, мы меряем как бы активацию тех, кто раньше не контактировал, начал контактировать, мы меряем регулярность платящих, их дисциплину платежей, они все начинают расти. То есть появляется как бы толстый хвост тех, кто там платит по 200 рублей, 300-500, как бы, каждый месяц.
Вань, скажи, пожалуйста, клиентская база. Мы по-прежнему основной клиент восточный, или это уже достаточно диверсифицированная база?
Сейчас в портфеле занимает меньше 5%.
Сколько?
Меньше 5%. Основной у нас сейчас by far это Сбербанк. И был вопрос про цены портфеля, и я дополню, цены растут. Например, если мы, частные банки, Тинькофф, например, когда сделки происходят, они происходят по цене ниже процента, то Сбербанк уже 2% есть. Зависит, допустим, сделка была с автокредитами, там, понятно, есть залог, там еще выше цена, то есть цены растут. И мы в моделях везде закладываем, что они удвоятся.
The company is now totally independent from Vostochny. I mean, we've even tried to reduce the debt owned by Vostochi bonds. Business, I think Vostochi has not sold any portfolio to PKB for the past 3 years. So,
Biggest client become Сбер.
Да, да. То есть у нас
Sber Trust.
Сколько долей Сбера?
больше 40% в портфеле Сбера. Он примерно так, как и в рынке. 45.
40% от всех кредитов там сберовские.
Примерно зеркальная структура.
А сколько всего клиентов?
По-моему, общая база 5,5 миллионов.
Нет, не может быть.
Банков.
Сколько нет банков?
Должников, ну, активных. Нет. Сколько всего банков?
Да. У кого мы покупаем? Наш клиент тот, у кого мы покупаем.
Я точно не скажу, ну, там 20, наверное, банков.
20?
В прошлый раз в какой-то момент мы обсуждали, что для нас было сюрпризом, что бизнес пострадал в условиях кризиса, цикла, нет цикла. Но в какой-то момент нам снижение цикла предстоит. У нас какой взгляд сейчас на это и как себя ведут вот другие европейские компании в условиях цикла?
Как вел себя EOS, мы знаем примерно. Они прекращают как бы активную деятельность и отдают портфели на агентирование всем вокруг, включая ПКБ и МСП.
Получается, что во время кризиса входят ножницы, что портфель, который есть, он просто дороже куплен, чем то, что взыскивается на момент кризиса.
But prior to the previous crisis, PKB was paying 5% on average for portfolios. So when collectability fell, that was, and over the last 4 years, we've averaged about 1 or 1.5%. So we have a bigger safety cushion than we did before. But it's still, the collection would for sure be affected by a major downturn.
I think what we underestimated last time is the fact that the crisis pushed all the Russian banks to keep their portfolio to play with the provision, the Russian accounting provision, because the rules were very different from IFRS. I think that gap is starting to be closed because of the change of regulation, and Russian accounting is closer to IFRS. The action of central bank also on retail banks is totally different. So I'm not sure that it's such a cyclical business compared to consumer finance. It does.
How the peers behave in the cycle in terms of how their performance changes in the down cycle.
That's a good point, yeah.
Там же еще в прошлый раз была большая доля агентского бизнеса, сейчас она совсем маленькая. То есть агентский бизнес больше всего пострадал от вот этих вещей. От свежий портфель, который банки придерживали, а для purchase пострадал меньше тогда.
It was never a huge part of PKB's or NSV, if you look at the consolidated profitability, but you're right that the
Нет, когда NSV купили, агентский бизнес был большой.
No,
for NSV it was big, but it was still as
it was 20% of the total.
Out of the total profit, it was 20% or whatever. So if 20% went to zero, that was still painful for sure.
Like that was a bit higher than that. We had like 600 million rubles of profits, of which maybe a third was attributable to MSV at the time we were doing the deal. So it was much higher. What the banks did, they just started to insource everything. So I think this trend is still there. So some banks practically do little or no outsourcing, but for now the agency business of the group is break even, growing steadily, small volumes. So we are not in the same position.
I'm not sure that we will have success in the near future on that, but we are trying also to develop new ideas of buying out fully the collection department of some mid-sized banks and to say, let's establish a long-term partnership. So we have active discussion with Credit Europe, for example, on that. They are open to the idea to totally outsource to us their collection with the existing staff, and for us to have a service level agreement on the performance. That could be something interesting for us to have stable revenue, and if we can have a good first precedent on the market, we could develop that structure.
Is that a model that works in other places?
Yeah, in Poland we have some examples on that. So.
Думаю, что в России это просто сложность в том, что во многих банках мы знаем примерно восточном это изнутри. Во многих банках никто не считает правильную стоимость коллекторской работы. Она вся как бы размазывается в общих расходах банка. И руководители и управленцы как бы, не смотрят на это как на бизнес, который можно эффективнее аутсорсить. Но думаю, что
мы через баланс не можем им это рассказать, правильно?
Вот, я думаю, что со временем, вот, особенно с более продвинутыми банками, будет потихонечку меняться, мы будем этим пользоваться. Еще одна большая тема, может быть, Филипп не упомянул ее, это мы развиваем сейчас, надеемся, в феврале этого года сделать первую крупную покупку портфеля у АСВ, агентства страхования вкладов. Ну, все знают, сколько банков попало на санацию, обязательства никуда не исчезли, они просто там накапливаются огромным мешком. И АСВ наконец-то стал как бы вести переговоры о том, что мы сами не можем взыскать, нужен кто-то, кто может. И
они просто через приставов, да? Там,
они даже, они через коллег, они же банки не закрыли, они их просто санировали. Да. И там есть коллекторские службы, которые что-то продолжают делать. Вот. Но у нас сейчас на столе лежит очень крупная сделка, там около 500 миллионов рублей, которые мы надеемся, что мы закроем. Это будет первая, во-первых, очень крупная покупка, а во-вторых, покупка именно, на наш взгляд, очень неправильно оцененного портфеля АСВ, потому что, в их, как бы, в общем котле, это точно neglected.
Они это надергивают с разных банков санированных или это от одного?
Но сейчас мы обсуждаем сделку с одного из санированных банков. Но глобально, естественно, это может быть начало как бы долгосрочного сотрудничества.
Вот эти перепакованные сабпрайм.
Maybe to sum up the discussion, so our priority for this year is really the short-term, the recap, because there could be material for, especially Fund 4, exit preparation, and the main issues, it's, we didn't talk a lot about that, but it's really Vlasov damage control, sorting out the good ideas from the bad ideas, and stopping him to demotivate the management team on a daily basis. And the second issue that we have is HR, because the management team is a little bit weak. So we are looking at ways to strengthen basically that management team, given the new size of the business, basically, given the new ambition that we have also.
Аня, какие-то нон-банковские сегменты есть? Международных компаний, да, где, соответственно, тоже можем...
Есть, но они нематериальные.
We have a small portfolio from telecom operators and fines.
Штрафы за ЖКХ, это...
You can imagine if it's MTS or Bacama, they're looking to collect $50 or $100 or whatever, so it's so small.
Ну и глобально та же самая картинка, да?
Нет, глобально это гораздо...
глобально телеком дороже стоит просто.
Да, телекомов больше...
And prepayment is the... so in Russia you have mostly prepayment, in Europe you have post-payment of telecom, so that's a different situation.
Yeah.
У Эртелеком что-то там накопилось.
По 20 рублей-то? По 20 рублей собирать.
Некоторые есть. У нас была политика долго, что мы не отключали даже полгода оплаты. Поэтому там накопилось.
Вот. Главная, ближайшая задача, как Филипп упомянул, это с Игорем рекап. Мы очень надеемся, что фидбэк от банков будет готовность к диалогу. Потому что по всем финансовым показателям, моделям, то, что мы показываем здесь, это наш бизнес as usual, as is. У него есть апсайды, и мы надеемся, что банки это оценят.
А какой объем вы таргетируете?
У нас есть два варианта. Один — таргетировать цифру около 5 миллиардов, из которых 5 плюс, для того, чтобы distribution был около 4-5, а остальное на рефинанс существующих бандов.
And half of that is going to us, and 80% is Fund 4. It will be joint recap with Da Vinci and Vlasov. Casimir with 6% will have a free ride, basically. But,
we don't know about Casimir yet, but Da Vinci, so basically 94% shares are standing by with the recap and pledge.
То есть будет pledge акции или что это будет?
Да, залог акций. Да. У нас есть промежуточная холдинговая компания, которая владеет 100%.
Это не наша акция, да, право этой компании.
А номер 2 игрок намного меньше?
В объеме портфелей нет, не намного, но в объеме прибыли выручки намного. Еще раз, номер 2 игрок — это EOS, немецкий иностранный игрок. они активны в покупках, но они не очень активны в операционном бизнесе. У них модель такая, как бы, видимо, это такой, как бы, вообще долгосрочный бет. Как бы. Можно купить дешево, покупая, но пока аутсорсим местным игрокам. У них есть собственный operations, но у них огромный бизнес аутсорсинг.
То есть они пока отдают просто маржу?
Дают, как бы, да, кому-то. Но, видимо, ожидая, что ну, как бы, действительно там цены портфелей и коллекшн эффективность повышается.
Угу. Если вот стратег там будет смотреть, вряд ли он будет считать нашу прибыльность sustainable, да? Ну, с учетом.
Нет, как раз наша прибыльность должна... прибыльность мы сейчас достаточно комфортно себя чувствуем, потому что она построена на долгосрочных продуктах. То, что Игорь спрашивал, там, за счет чего у нас все поменялось. Большая часть изменений это то, что до этого как бы, это была постоянная молотилка, где нужно было отрабатывать как бы, большой объем, и ты этих людей потом не видел. А сейчас это мы наращиваем прослойку тех, кто платит регулярно, гораздо более здоровая модель. Поэтому она...
будет цена за портфель расти, да?
Да, и поэтому цена и растет. Да. Но один из больших факторов, как бы, реально, что сработало, это заработала сетевая система. То есть, если до этого там мы подавали 1-2 тысячи дел в месяц, сейчас мы подаем 50 тысяч. И, естественно, как бы, 50-кратно. До этого там, суды электронно не могли обрабатывать электронный документооборот, а сейчас могут.
В стране или у нас?
50 тысяч пунктов.
Я имею в виду, что это изменение там мы сделали, там как-то.
Нет, это
в самом стране.
В целом.
Позитив.
Other questions?
Даша.
Восточный, and please in English, because Rahul is joined.
So, OEB is also short story, it's positive report on the operational side and financial side of things. So, the bank we expect is going to close the year with roughly 10 billion net income, having increased net retail portfolio by roughly 20%, 22-23%. The ultimate IFRS net profit will be lower due to extraordinary provisions we'll have to book on ex-Niastrum assets. So we probably think it could be around 3 to 4 billion. But what matters for us and what we are focused on constantly is the organic profitability of the retail business. The growth this year in the market overall is around also 20+%. Of course, the fastest growing segment is still mortgages, but unsecured lending has picked up. Big part of that growth is the home equity piece. So we've got other banks stepping into the same race for secured home equity. They're still consumer lending products, but they are, as opposed to mortgages, secured by either homes or properties or cars or vehicles. So we've got Softcombank becoming very active in the field. Tinkoff has a strategy for that product next year. So it's becoming a more crowded area. And Vostochny, pleased to say that Vostochny was one of the leaders who moved first in that direction. Has built some expertise. We think they're not ambitious enough to gain more market share in that product. But overall, this is one of the positive developments. Speaking of the capital situation in the bank, so we closed the year with roughly, and this is Russian accounting standards. In the end of the year, we had intense negotiations with the central bank about the results of the inspection that lasted for almost 9 to 10 months. As the result of that inspection, we've received a very sizable bill for additional provisions to be written off into Russian accounts, roughly 20 billion rubles. Somewhat around 7 of those 20 were written off or provided for in the second half of the year. So we ended the year with a capital surplus of roughly 4 billion. So 19.6 total bill, 7 roughly created. So we are in around 13 remaining, of which 4 is our surplus, and 5 is the capital increase that central bank has required shareholders to proceed with. So we see that after the capital increase and few more months of sustainable profitability, the bank should be fully recapitalized The most difficult issues for us remain ex-Uniastro corporate loans. Unfortunately, there are more bad news than good news. So, two largest borrowers who collectively own something like 15 billion rubles have not been paying since September, and we are in constant attempts to negotiate either some form of restructuring where they start paying, or working on an alternative scenario where we remove the assets from the balance sheet to a vehicle, so that to enable the bank to take more aggressive steps like foreclosure, without incurring 100% provision, because even in the plan 19.6, they are roughly provided for 50%, because ultimately they are not bad assets. It's really a problem of willingness rather than capacity. And we need to be in a position to strengthen the negotiating leverage of the bank to force the counterparties to pay. The problem, of course, is that we're getting more and more evidence that the people have commercial links with our co-shareholder, and that's, of course, is complicating how we can take more serious steps to foreclose. So,
So out of the 15 billion exposure for them, how much has been provisioned under IFRS already?
I can't answer on top of my mind. What I calculated previously is that we expect around 6 billion of additional charges to IFRS on assets that are included in the plan and have not been fully impaired in IFRS accounts, of which actually a big part is Stupina land plot, which was valued in the previous version of IFRS at 4 billion. And this time we're going to value it below 1 billion at the year end. So overall, financially, organic situation is good. Beginning of the year is also okay, so we have no negative news to report. We were in Pravlenia this week. They started the year a bit slow, but risk factors and organic profit indicators are all stable.
Sorry, Vanya, back on that issue. At what point, if they continue not to pay, do we need to re-provision? Or
our strategy is to either we already identified a vendor, like a service provider with Alvarez and Marshall, which is a professional manager for troubled situations, who would be prepared to, with special arrangements, to remove those assets from a balance sheet and be kind of the agent who takes more aggressive steps to force the guys to pay. So that would allow us not to create the full provision. And the intrinsic value of the assets, of course, I think 50% write-off is a huge write-off, because they are real greenhouses. They're really constructed. They're really worth the money that were invested. We compared with the metrics how much was, for example, spent per hectare on greenhouses, and what do we have in the collateral. So the value is there. It's mostly the problem of the guys being connected with our shareholder and maybe coordinating efforts with him and therefore refusing to pay. So strategy is to remove from the balance sheet, force to pay, because the bank has all the means, like collateral agreements, pledge agreements, all the contractual documentation. It's just straightforward enforcement of those things would require a bankruptcy procedure, which entails immediately 100% provision, which is means over provisioning given the quality of the assets. We'd like to avoid that because it would be just too much stress for the bank. But if we have to, just to finish on that, we managed, and this is unconfirmed yet, so we had, to remind you, in the middle of the year, a special situation with the bank investing additional funds in Russian state debt, OFZ. So when the sanctions hit hard, the bank was forced to reprice and reflect mark-to-market negative revaluation of their portfolio. which was roughly to the tune of 4 billion rubles, because there was the total portfolio is around total securities. It was around 70 billion, of which roughly 40 was state debt. So in January 19, as part of transition into IFRS standard with the Russian accounts, they transferred that pool of state debt into a held to maturity account in the Russian accounts, which enabled them to account for it at the purchase price. So we basically restored that negative revaluation plus 4 billion in Russian statutory capital. So at the end of January, provided the central bank takes no explicit hard measures against us, we should have 8 billion surplus. And that would, even the worst case scenario, coming to your question, if we fail to find a creative structure to push Zika to pay, we will have a surplus to take all the necessary measures, even on the balance sheet of the bank. This is undesirable because it will be like public, visible, etc. But we have plan B.
When we just looking at the numbers, can you comment on what the numbers mean on the book and why the net income is forecast to go down?
Net income forecast is just our conservative planning. So we plan 1% increase in cost of funds, we plan 1% increase in cost of risk, and we plan modest portfolio growth and reduction in yield. So this is like current business model taken, and with some conservative assumptions on risk and funding.
And on next year, I think that was the initial management proposal, 9.5. Yesterday we approved the budget at 10.4. And we think it's really realistic for them. So as Vanya mentioned, they are lacking ambition. We believe they can do over 10 billion organic.
I believe 27% retail portfolio growth. Was that changed? Was it a more aggressive kind of?
No, it's a start of car loan, boosting home equity. POS is developing very well over budget. Tinkoff is planning something similar. So
is that modest growth?
Yeah, that's
feasible.
I think so. On the unsecured mass market portfolio, we are planning a single-digit growth. On secured products, POS loans and car loans, we are planning, for example, car loans are starting from a few hundred million, and we're going to make, we think it's going to be 3 to 5 billion. So we target management with 5, management is getting back with 3. So it's a new product. They're going to start with multiple billion production during the year. So total growth is a result of change in product mix rather than increase in ticket or increase in mass market credit cards.
The new event, the recent event is also a change of regulation. On Christmas Day, CBR changed the PSK coefficient. So basically, doing consumer finance will require more capital. So that's positive on a systemic point of view. So the market will further cool down, and market participants will need to have capital. The impact for Vostochny for this year will be 600 million additional capital for the same business requirement. So, but on the long term, that could be between 1 and 2 billion on 2020.
I think the long-term question that we constantly ask ourselves is what is the turn of the cycle, when the cycle is going to turn, and how. So I think strategically this is the most important thing that we should be worried about. So far, as we described in our investment memo and everything, there are no signs. But we proactively, we kind of organize like a working session where we try to put all the leading indicators in place. So that to make sure we react promptly if anything changes. So far, no signs of. And the CBR, as Philip mentioned, all of these efforts from the regulator, including, for example, in Q1 this year, they're going to introduce payment to income caps, so PTI. So the banks will be required to obtain confirmation of the income, and they would not be allowed to lend more than a certain ratio to income. So all of these steps eventually lead to more healthy consumer lending balance in terms of indebtedness, which is totally fine with us. We'd like to focus the bank more on secure products, which consume more capital. They are less yielding. The yield on home equity is like 23% versus 50% on subprime credit cards. but they're longer in maturity, don't turn your portfolio over 2 times a year, so that it has other benefits on the cost side.
Sorry, on page 14 it shows that your cost of funds for 2019 is flat and your cost of risk is down. How does this reconcile with what you said regarding the budget for 2019?
Well, it should be plus 1% up.
Okay. The actual budget shows 1% up, so we need to check these numbers, whether they're old or... Okay.
I think it's better to look at the ruble numbers, not the dollar ones.
I'm looking at the ruble.
I'm also looking at the ruble, so I see what you're referring to. I only have one, maybe it's just a reallocation, because we reallocated deposit insurance agency payments from OPEX category into cost of fund category. That could be like the explanation. It's roughly around a percentage point.
Why at this point 9.5 million of net billion. Does this include the full provisioning of those 2 corporate loans?
No, it's purely organic.
It's purely, that's an important caveat to make. So we have between 18 or 19 or 20, somewhere between these two or three dates, we have extra 6 to 7 billion in IFRS, which we expect will be written off. So maybe they'll be written off in 2018, and our IFRS profit will be 3-4 instead of 10. Maybe some of it will, depending on how auditors look at it, maybe some of that will end up being provisioned in 2019. We don't know, but we know for a fact that from the CBR inspection results, we have a plan from central bank. This plan is officially disclosed to the auditors, and if they just compare IFRS and Russian provisions, they will conclude that in Russian accounts, in the CBR plan, some assets are provisioned, and they are not at the same level provisioned in IFRS. So there's going to be this additional charge somewhere.
Obviously, we can influence that. I think it's in our interest to take some of those provisions under IFRS in 2018. So we should have a net income higher than 2017, but absorb as much as possible then in 2018. So we should growth into 2019.
Yeah, I confirm that actually. We had the board meeting yesterday and the budget was approved yesterday. So yesterday we approved 15.5 billion OPEX budget, and here it's 16.7. So the plan will get updated next time.
Can you comment on the current negotiations and what we expect before whatever the
Yeah, so there has been a unanimous board decision approving the capital increase. It's obviously been already approved by the shareholders meeting, approving the price per share at 1 kopeck a share. And we also got an extra waiver, we insisted on an extra waiver being signed by Finvision and Efetisian, specifically confirming that they agree on the 1 kopeck, they waive any claims against it and everything else. And anyway, a week afterwards, they said that we only signed that because of, pressure, and we don't agree. We think the fair price is, if we're not participating, the fair price is 2 kopecks a share instead of 1 kopeck a share. And they're saying that's the only issue that's outstanding. Everything else is agreed. We understand that they have essentially failed to sell Module Bank, which is what they thought when we went. When he initially asked me to extend the capital increase from December to April, it was to allow him to sell Module and then have his money to do the capital increase. And we went together to the central bank, met in Ibulina. In that meeting, he said, if I don't get the money, I'm happy to be diluted, and I understand. And 2 days later, then he starts, trying to negotiate about the price and other things like that. So clearly there's still an issue. Just to quantify what it means, if they don't participate and we subscribe the full 5 billion, and it happens at 1 kopeck a share, we would end up with about 70% of the company's shares after the deal. And if we do it at 2 kopecks a share, we would end up with about 63% or something like that. So it obviously makes a difference, but because we already own 56%, it's not as big of a difference. So we still think, as a matter of principle, there's no need to compromise, and we don't want to compromise. But obviously, if they offer us something else in return that's very valuable, like, you know,
Maybe that's the repayment of this 15 billion. No?
yeah, there's different, you know, basically that's what I've said, that, you know, one-way compromise from our side, forget about it. But if you're prepared to, you know, if there could be a two-way compromise, then yes, we can discuss that. But we haven't gotten into any details, and there's probably room for a compromise to meet in the middle if they give us, you know, if we change the shareholders agreement to give us full, you know, full operational control, remove some of their related, you know, their reserve matters or, you know, various things like that. But we don't feel like we need to compromise much. They're in a very weak position, and it's also completely unfair. You know, the 1 kopeck is much closer to the fair value than 2 kopecks. So, so the short answer is, though, they're girding up for conflict, and we should expect it. So we've been preparing for it as well. And unfortunately, for the next, you know, probably 4 months or something like that, that's going to be a lot of distraction and you know, tension.
What's your impression from new CEO, from Mr. Eng?
He is very loyal to the bank. He has some moral standards. So, for example, when I do it's not an unimportant thing. So he is very loyal to the bank, which is fully aligned with us. He is a bit slow in taking some decisions which are really necessary, but they will be perceived by the other side as made against them. For example, there are hundreds of people employed doing pretty much nothing on SME kind of development, or there are people who stole documents from the bank that they need to be dismissed. So, and he knows that if he does it, the other side will immediately accuse him of being loyal to Bengal stock or one-sided. And so far he has been reluctant to make those necessary decisions. But we hope that he's moving in the direction. We got head of security, which was a very critical and important position, changed. The new head of security is in the bank has been in the bank since Monday. We understand an offer to the head of legal is about to be made today. So he is slowly getting there, and we need to do a lot of maintenance on our side to make sure we offer him both pressure and support. So in combination.
Good enough for it to drive the future exit, or is it like an interim candidate?
He's kind of, I'm not sure, too early to say. I mean, I think today we value a lot loyalty. That's you know, what we need. He's lacking a little bit of leadership. I'm not sure that he has a good reaction on all retail, because he's only partially a retail guy. He was more like VIP type of retail. So we'll see. But
he's good, but not great. And, yeah, you know, he's not a. He's probably a 4 or 4+. You know, but he's most important thing is that he's honest and independent. Right. That's by far the most important thing right now. And he's also experienced and pretty safe, right? So he's not a cowboy or a daredevil.
And honestly, today we have no choice, right? So we should work with him. I think the question should be raised, you know, after, whether we believe that he will be the one driving the exit or not.
Is our independent board member still?
He's not ours. He's an independent board member. He's truly independent, but he's not under their influence.
No, I mean ours as the bank. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Is the bank's independent board member?
Yes. He's acting independently in a good way.
He's not fed up with the kind of bickering between us and all that?
No, he knows both shareholders, so he was expecting things like that.
Okay, so this arrangement seems to be working, and is...
You know, we are pleased by the way he's doing his job independently.
Yeah. He likes us on this.
Yeah. Yesterday he signed the first time he signed the ballot, which will be a 5 versus 4 vote. Elected Mike as chairman of the board. So it's also a positive step.
Yeah, I just meant that. So that piece of the kind of 4 + 4 + 1 is working and is okay.
Anyway, the most important thing is to fulfill the promise that we made to the central bank about the capital increase, and to be smart to cut off any kind of procedural mistakes or technical or legal mistakes that could cause them to try to stop the new emission or thwart it. And we have very strong chance to be able to do that, but we just have to be very vigilant to make sure we're, being smart and tough.
What are your thoughts on the exit? I have to ask.
Yeah, well, right now we're focused on getting through April and getting this, and so obviously until then, Selfcom Bank is still out there. They're, still an interested potential buyer. There is a Chinese bank that's indicated an interest in buying ATB in the Far East. That's a good sign as well. So I think, our view is that once we get through this, we need to make sure we bed down the proper corporate governance arrangements and establish the right sort of position as a shareholder and control of the strategy that's in place. But we would plan to start meeting and networking with Chinese buyers the same way we've been doing with PKB with both of those potential buyers to get on their radar screen. And that's not a short-term thing. And with Selfcom, make sure that the door is always open. It would always be a non-cash deal with them, so there's no real urgency to do that if they're not really planning to do their IPO. But if they start getting close to an IPO, I'm sure that they would have an interest in doing a deal of, some sort of accretive deal. But, that would be the approach, basically.
Other questions?
Usvil, page 21. We finished the year with 700 stores, while at the beginning of 2018 we had just 450. For next year, the company plans to open another 360 stores. We continue to focus on Moscow, regions, and St. Petersburg. Last year we entered St. Petersburg. Today we have 15 stores there, and the plan is to reach almost 100 stores in St. Pete by the end of this year. As for regions, today we have roughly 40. The plan is to open another 40 this year, and so the remainder will be opened in Moscow. The performance is good. Last year, our average revenue increased by 5% year over year, and we plan another 3% increase in our budget for 2019. In terms of management, management is doing well. They are pretty ambitious and motivated. They have a lot of initiatives right now. We started to open stores in offices. Today we have 9 stores in offices. And, the company believes there is a potential to open 1,000 stores in Moscow in the next 5 years. The company is also exploring...
Is it a different format?
What's it?
Is it a different format?
A slightly different format. It is located inside an office building. So
smaller?
Yes, it's smaller. Of course, it's not 1.5 thousand SKUs roughly. Yes, 100 SKUs. With focus on on ready-to-eat things. Dairy and ready-to-eat.
Wait, so okay, just stepping back. So if you take Moscow, you take you take the region. So Moscow, is these office things? Is that because we think we're going to approach saturation in our existing format, and this is another growth, or is this? Can you just put kind of you threw the numbers out, but let's put it in context what it means, big picture.
So far, we have no talks about reaching the ceiling in any of our markets of presence. Basically, we believe that St. Pete is good, and we focus on it. In Moscow, initially we planned to reach 1,000 stores, but now we believe that we can easily reach 1.5 thousand stores over the next 2-3 years. So we have to do some additional analysis to quantify it, but so far the company told us that the plan is to open 3 to 350 stores per year during the next 3 to 5 years. So basically, no talks about reaching saturation so far. But of course, Moscow and St. Pete are key markets for us because regions.
How have the St. Pete stores traded in terms of the how many months till they break even and the overall unit economics compared to Moscow?
Roughly comparable to Moscow stores. So far we have just 13 stores and roughly 5 or 6 were just opened in December. So we have very little base to judge right now. But overall the company is very positive on St. Pete and we still stick to 200 stores in St. Pete at least.
Do we have a supply chain around St. Petersburg that's similar to Moscow, or is it coming?
No, we source products from our North Moscow warehouse. The plan is to open a dedicated warehouse in St. Pete in first quarter, because we have to reach at least 20 to 30 stores in order to justify a separate warehouse.
But in terms of suppliers, are there
Farmers and
suppliers that they can source from?
Yes, they can. And besides, we are thinking of new dedicated suppliers which will come from St. Petersburg, because there is some willingness of St. Pete customers to have local producers which they know. And they are located close to St. Petersburg area. So far, no constraints in terms of supply chain. There is a constraint in terms of logistics for St. Pete, but we will hopefully solve it in first quarter. Another initiative besides our traditional Wholesale format is, as I said, stores inside offices, shops without sellers, and other initiatives as well. So basically our task right now is to quantify the potential of this new business line. Because the company is ambitious and they believe they have enough capacity not to work on Wholesale format, but also to explore new opportunities which are quite hot worldwide right now. For example, Amazon is doing stores without sellers, and I guess Wholesale is the first one who can do it in Russia, because it's quite Magnet and Lenta, they are 5 years behind Wholesale in terms of technology. In terms of issues which we have, first of all, is probably...
Can you comment on the format for the regions and how we see the regions? Because that's the key. Obviously, all of the initiatives are nice, but for the foreseeable future, they're going to be much.
Well, the company started to test a new format, which is called, let's call it Wholesale Mini. It is a store of 80 to 100 square meters trade area. It has roughly 700 SKUs, and capex to open a store is just 1 million rubles. So the idea is to make it profitable with a revenue of 200,000 rubles per day, while our classic Wholesale has 300,000 rubles per day. We opened first store in Moscow already. It works well. The plan is to maybe open another up to 10 stores in Moscow to test the format. And then probably we will reconsider our strategy in regions, because there is an idea to test this format in regions, because so far we do not see a lot of potential in regions. Of course, we can open 1 or 2 stores in any small city of any regional city, but in order to...
But the issue was not necessarily the size of the store, the issue was the prices, which are obviously what's working in Moscow and St. Petersburg is too expensive.
Well, we are exploring an opportunity to, first of all, also to find some local producers for regions, to make our cost of logistics lower. And we are also thinking about introducing a new assortment, which will be sold exclusively in regions and which will be more cheap than our Moscow assortment. But so far, we are exploring it, and we still need some time to make it, to finalize it.
So year 20 and 21, it's the old forecast, right?
Yes, it's an old forecast in terms of revenue.
You mentioned 1,500 stores the next 2 years just in Moscow.
I would say not in... Yes. The plan is to continue opening by 3,500 stores per year in the next 3 to 5 years.
Does the performance of the old stores in Moscow deteriorate?
Well, it is still positive. I would say it is maybe +1%, +2% in 2019.
Like for like, yeah?
Yes. So they're still growing, but the growth is going down, of course.
How have they changed the assortment over the year? Because obviously, the like-for-like depends on the expansion of the assortment. What was in 2018? What was the expansion? What was the change in the assortment?
I think at the beginning of the year we had roughly 1.5 thousand SKUs. Now we have 1.7, and I expect that we reached a ceiling in terms of number of SKUs. Generally, due to our store format, we do not have enough area.
What is the timing on the regional strategy? Because I think obviously for the exit, Moscow and St. Petersburg are already well defined.
First quarter this year, we should.
If you don't even have a pilot out.
I don't think it's the first quarter. I think realistically it's kind of mid-year or the third quarter, right?
So you need to find the assortment, and you need to run several pilots. That's probably.
If you put it this way, yes, it's not first.
How can you? Otherwise, how can you?
So I think kind of the first half of the year will be kind of testing different regions, including Kazan and wherever, Yulos, wherever, right? But then to formulate kind of the expansion strategy and quantify it will be actually kind of closer towards fall, right? Or even the end of the year.
That's the biggest kind of unknown upside.
That's the biggest unknown, yes.
Because all of the initiatives are nice, and I think that's kind of position the company as this technology business in FMCG rather.
The issue with the local supply chain, unfortunately, that like you need some certain like size quantity of the stores, even for St. Pete, for instance. Now it's just like what they find is that it's cheaper for them to have the Moscow suppliers, so the Moscow-based suppliers, ship to Moscow and then send a truck overnight to St. Pete, right? Than to have regional, like dedicated St. Pete suppliers, right? Or Northwest suppliers, right? So you need.
Besides the cost, it's the quality control that I would be most worried about, so that
right.
customers should feel like they get the same great quality, whether they're buying it in St. Petersburg or Moscow or whatever.
So it takes time, and you need certain like scale to have to make it efficient, right? So, and you know, it will be basically separate for each region, right? But at least, you know, my view, they need at least whatever, like 9 months to test kind of their regional strategy in the.
But they also need to understand the assortment, because this is the local suppliers. They may be cheaper, but it will essentially be different type of products that they sell at cheaper price.
The drop in EBITDA margin, so obviously I would assume your explanation would be that it's not reflecting a real drop in profitability. It's because of the growth in number of stores. But we also grew in 2017 by 50% and maintained the EBITDA margin. Actually, it increased the EBITDA margin. So the absolute number of stores grew, but the pace didn't grow. So are we sure that we're not seeing a deterioration in unit economics?
Well, there is some explanation for 2018, because despite our huge amount of openings, we also had an excessive amount of closings. And during 2018, roughly 15% of new openings were closed, and we have these expenses put into P&L. So basically, expenses related to closings deteriorate our margin in 2018. But overall, we did this unit economics analysis a couple of months ago. Our payback is still less than 1 year. So I don't see any deterioration right now.
But the question is about store economics on the kind of after this 1 year. What is the sustainable EBITDA margin first on the store?
There is a decrease in gross margin as well, right? Like 1% or 100% basis points.
That was expected because of the mix, but I think the question is what is happening over the overall.
Yes, okay. I expect that this is a question which we should investigate next year in first quarter. So far, Historically, we planned to reach EBITDA margin of 8 to 10% because of our exposure to private label, etc. Currently, we see that in order to achieve it, we have to have store EBITDA margin at the level of 11 to 12%. Next year, the company budgets store EBITDA margin at 8%. So basically, there is some gap between our expectations and reality.
And if you look by cohorts, kind of more mature stores, what is it?
The most mature stores, they continue to report double-digit store EBITDA, 10 to 11, 12%. But newer stores, they report slightly lower numbers. But we have to update our cohort analysis right now. But I expect that there is some decline in our long-term profitability when we stop growing. But we see that overall in Russia margins decreased. When we made an investment in 2016, Magnit had 10% EBITDA margin.
We are not Magnit again, but
I understand,
let's
but
look at
this
the
is an
cohorts.
industry situation. Retailers, margins of retailers decline. Of course, we should have higher margins than Magnit and Dixie and other players. But there is a question.
Let's do the analysis, but
Yes, we will.
because this is the expectation on the gross margin falling was a result of the mix, because we were a dairy player. Now we have much wider assortment, so let's look at
And we also,
the real numbers.
it was partially our decision to decrease prices. Not only assortment, but
That's clear.
we
And obviously in the regions there will be lower, and with a bigger scale, that's we should be more efficient on the SG&A level, so there may be some savings there as well. But that's something that we need to do a detailed analysis.
Yes, this is our main priority right now, is to update our model to understand potential, to understand margins, where do we go, and also to try to quantify these new business lines which is company developing right now. Because we also have to find positioning for our expected exit, because we want to step away from the image of DC Magnit and other traditional players, like Tinkoff did during his IPO. He said, "I'm not a bank, technology company." So
We're different.
Like this.
We are different not just because we want to sell this at a higher multiple.
Yes, we are a brand. We are a brand. We are not a shelf with a mix of products.
Don't sell it to us.
I do not know any other supermarkets which where we have e-commerce selling their products to the customers, branded products. Whoosville is across pretty much now. Ozon is starting to sell, Utkanos is selling, and everybody is interested to sell Whoosville products.
Yes.
So Whoosville is a brand, FMCG brand, as well as the. Tinkoff sold this, and Tinkoff is valued where it is because he looks at what is the nature of the business, and the same with all of our best companies. This is one of the best companies, and if we start selling everything, at a discount to international multiples and comparing it to the peers, it's not going to work.
Phrased differently, or a different way to look at it is, in other markets where there are niche players which have differentiated themselves from kind of a boring, typical, low multiple business, how have those companies successfully done that? Because I'm sure that there are niche retail stores which have been able to differentiate themselves.
David, I think because we are, even in e-commerce, basically e-commerce companies are delivering Whoosville products, buying Whoosville products. So we are not a niche. We should not be looking at ourselves as just a niche retail.
Okay.
It's not just that.
So
understanding.
Use different words. So forget those words. Take Ilaya's point. But my point is a nuance on that is saying this big story that we're playing out here, which is differentiated, Also, just in terms of positioning and that sort of thing, you can also look at how other folks have differentiated themselves.
Yeah, we're not about retail, we're about the brand, the quality of
Technology.
product, the producer.
Obviously, we need
brand
to,
keeper.
yeah, we need to kind of understand where we stand. We need to understand how we differentiate ourselves away from the retailers. All of them are in huge trouble, and all of them are for sale, and we are growing 70%. Maybe there is a risk that at some point they'll figure out and they'll fix their business model, and then we'll have the real issue. For now, obviously, it's the biggest part of the growth is the geographical distribution, expansion.
Other questions?
Ритейлером, да, не бренд. Не, бренд.
Или
Ритейлером со своим брендом, да, ну, то есть это ритейлером нет.
Familiar on русский, английский, что-то запустил.
English.
Familiar on the market, we have on the market generally, 2018 proved to be, from what we know from the major apparel retailers, which are offline based, to be a challenging year in terms of both pricing and demand. Camellia ticked to plus 4% like-for-like, which is one of the best results in the industry, understandably because of the business model, but also I think the business processes that the company introduced in 2018 were a major factor of it.
Budget versus actual is so precise, it makes me suspicious.
They're always the same. They're like they're very acute to the numbers.
I mean, it's 0.1% variance, so it's.
They were below the budget for 10 months, and they were very unhappy about it as a management, but December proved to be a very good month for us. So if you look at like 10 months performance, they were below, and they were not in the forecasted numbers, but the December made it all just because of the season. So they're very in line and ticked. I'm not sure, just given we look at all the metrics line by line and everything, I'm just very sure that the data analytics they use is very up to the point. But also, of course, they're conservative management that prefer to be in line with the budget or above the budget, but not underperforming. That's one of the reasons for 2019 numbers that you see in the write-up. Basically, what we have right now is the argument between founders and us as a financial shareholders about the new normal of payback of the stores. What I mean is basically they typically have about 8 to 9 months payback for the store, which is super for apparel, for actually any type of the business and retail, but for apparel specifically. And what we are trying to get to the management and to the company is that payback of 12 months and even 15 months is still quite a good story. And we, in regions specifically, when we see such a paybacks in Siberia or somewhere in new regions, this is perfectly normal, given that they're new in the region. And they should be, embracing it and just focusing on the getting to the market share that they have to achieve. For both the founders and majority of the founders, because management does not have a very significant voice in that, if the founders agree. But the founders are very, careful in terms of, this is a different payback, this is a different geography. We want to be absolutely sure that this will give us the same amount of dividends that we're, used to. And I think we're in the position in the first quarter of 2019 to discuss the financial model in terms of mathematics, in terms of how will the value look like if we embrace this new normal economics, which is still very healthy. But does franchising make sense in this industry or not? Because this is basically how people solve the problem with.
Typically, nobody has it. In terms of off-price retailers, nobody has it, and frankly, I don't believe we should have it, just because it's a super result. Even 15-month payback is a super result for apparel. Just for the talks perspective, we embrace different structures like franchising, like new countries franchising as well with a payback if everything
We
turns
make
out.
money on, obviously, on,
On the gross margin, we do.
Yes, on the
We do.
gross margin.
The question is, how do you manage the story? It's a very, technical one, but I do think it's one of the options to discuss. But basically, what we're having in March, we're having a strategic discussion in March, where we're basically having two business models, financial models, which with one of them keeping the payback, which is 8 to 9 months opening of whatever. 30, 40, 50 stores per year with this payback and, equity value of the company in 5 years with this approach, or embracing the, a little bit longer paybacks in the regions, opening more of the stores and having much more of an equity value in 3-4 years. I think with those numbers in hand, companies not prepared to do that, we will do that ourselves and show it to them. But with that numbers in hand, we will have a pretty good discussions with the Goldmans, which supposedly will support us in speeding up the growth, and the founders who will hopefully understand how the math works in terms of the longer perspective, because I think they feel it, but they are somehow immune to the to our arguments without the proper math in our hands. So once we have it, I think we will have a very clear options. So option one is, and preferred option, is basically to speed up the development with the new normal economics of the store, which is, again, pretty good, with the aim of increasing the speed of the growth of the company. If we do have a very aggressive, and they might have a very strong position in terms of founders that they don't want to speed up the openings, they want to be careful, they want to do it their own way, which might happen, but the probability, I think, is still there. We have two options. We have first option of, again, speaking to the banks about recap, and I think that we have more arguments to do that, just because the growth is slower. We don't have a very, seasonal offer in terms of, we don't have much openings to have capex, so we do have more free cash flow to talk about recap, and I think we will touch base with Igor about that, just to understand what the levels might be and what the rates might be. And option 3 for us is basically if all of our attempts don't play out, unfortunately, we have an exit story, which is pretty good. And for us to sell at that moment, it might be a good story just because we have a lot of potential still. We see some of the headwinds in terms of the growth and everything, but there's a lot of appetite for the asset, understandably. There are some calls that I'm getting every month in terms of, from RDIF, from Elbrus, from everybody else just saying, let's discuss, maybe we have some, some interest to the asset, what's your take on the exit, So we have some appetite and some hype on the assets, which is good. And coming back to David's point of yesterday, this might be a perfect position to sell in terms of just the absolute size of the asset. It really depends on how it will go on the strategic.
At the same time, I think the key issue with Familia, and we discussed this several times, the key issue is that for this, we just happened on a great business model. I'm not sure we understood when we invested, but right now it's compared to the potential. And at the same time, with essentially $100 million of EBITDA this year, that's not cheap. That's not small exit already. Mm-hmm. And the question is if we can understand and unlock, because we are slowing down on the growth, which should be happening, but there is no saturation in the country. This is unless we either unlock the growth and show that it's a much bigger story with this huge potential, and then it's I feel if we are same size as Детское Мир Center.
Well, we will be.
Yes.
This year. The issue is basically if we do unlock this growth, because
this year was the EBITDA.
No. I mean, in the future because we're basically having like $5 billion revenue.
Just keep growing slower than we are.
I understand that might be. I understand it perfectly, and they have 8.5 multiple on they are traded
Why
at
we're not
8.5.
talking about IPO? Why are
We are
saying-
talking about IPO, but bankers are saying show us the growth of 20% plus, and we're not showing 20% plus. That's the issue. So the question is basically if we cannot, for some reason, technical, founders, whatever, if we cannot push it to the level they grow, we might just catch a hype and have a perfect deal, which is purely financial. I'm not saying we will do that. I'm just saying.
Perfect deal is
I would be
not
very
purely
careful,
financial.
though, to IPO is great, but I wouldn't manage the business in terms of store openings now, to achieve targets that are just for an IPO if we think it would be, exposing the business to overexpansion or something like that.
Again, it's a question of lower payback, which is super payback, but still lower than founders kind of got used to. So every time we're discussing new store openings, they're like, well, this is 14 months payback. And I'm like saying, what? So what? It's good. Let's invest in a new region. Well, we're not sure.
So we looked at the price as basically as percentage of overall retail by different countries when we did the analysis. And Familia is nowhere. It's
Yes, do you
zero.
agree that we're far from saturation? Or do you disagree with
I agree that we have a lot of potential to catch up. I agree that we made a lot of progress since we invested to reach that saturation. But I think we have at least 4 times growth in terms of revenue, just to compare us to whatever. Just given the size of the markets and percentage. We did exactly that analysis with the company in
And
middle of 2018.
with this kind of unit economics, basically, if the cohorts, if the cohorts for the new openings are good and healthy, you invest more,
That's exactly what the argument is about. They're a little bit worse than the previous cohorts that they were, but it's okay. It's not like so the growth.
They're in a different region and not
Exactly.
something.
Exactly. And just because we're opening in, for example, Siberia, first of all, nobody knows us. Second, they have Familia, whatever company that is doing exactly the same. They're selling clothes, but they're a copycat of us. So they're
Just the point is selling to financial investor who has the same or higher cost of capital than we are means that we believe that we are smarter than they are. And we should.
Or are we gonna do anything? Well, it's not that we believe that we're smarter than we are. It's a question of maximizing.
Why would somebody pay the price that we value the success of that and still make whatever? I am not saying that it's totally excluded, but it's a great asset. It's been a great run. This asset has a lot of potential if you look at any other market. How do we unlock it? What do we do to unlock it?
It's a great question.
Why do we have our profitability a little bit decreasing once our growth is slowing down?
It's 2 points. First, it's the VAT introduction. We have a lot of inventory stocked at 18%, and we're selling at 20%. It's one of the points that it's basically, and we cannot increase prices much. We're very price sensitive in terms of how market is pricing. So what we're having right now, so once you have...
There's definitely inflation in clothing market.
It's not inflation, it's VAT.
Yeah, I understand, but you see price increasing everywhere.
No. No. If you really want to see that, I mean, we have all the analysis. They're not. It's basically once you price, what Familia does is they look at the price levels of different categories and different brands.
You budgeted, right?
We budget the gross margin decline. Yes, we do. We actually anticipated the gross margin decline when we entered, just because the gross margin was super abnormally high versus the other off-price retailers. They have very high gross margin. So, but this specifically, so 80% of this is VAT. What I mean is that in first half 2019, the inventory that is being sold is right now on the balance sheet of Familia, most of it. So what I'm trying to say, or secured and contracted with a VAT of 18%. So once you buy it with 18 and sell it with 20%, you have an effect of gross margin contraction.
Все повышают цены. Все в цене на рынке. Эти 2% все уже потерли руки, подняли цены.
If that happens, we will not have this effect. But from what we saw in 2018 and 2017, the pricing were flat in terms of basic categories that we're looking at.
Small question. Why don't we show Burlington as a peer?
Do what?
Why don't we show Burlington store as a peer?
First,
Burlington. It's,
Burlington.
Burlington store. We can show it. I think no, not a big issue. I think we can add it. Yeah.
Why do we forecast the EBITDA margin so much higher than the peers?
It's IFRS issue again. So the question is basically.
No, you.
Yes.
Okay.
I understand the question.
23, whatever, 23.8 in 2000.
Do we show IFRS EBITDA in the peers comparison?
Yes, IFRS.
The question is basically everybody wants the IFRS of rent.
There is a mistake in
This is the
apples to
issue.
apples comparison.
There will be a restatement.
Они
of
взяли
every
IFRS
retailer.
по 2018 году и раз по... Все наоборот.
Я не про это. I just looked at the margins, EBITDA margins of Ross and
Is there any history of Ross and TJ Maxx doing M&A?
TJ Maxx did a small deal of something like $15 million in Australia about 3 years ago.
And that's it.
That's it.
Not encouraging.
Well, there is nobody actually out there to buy. That is also one of the factors. It's not like we have a lot of off-price retailers elsewhere. But coming back to Lena's question,
Детский мир is trading at whatever 9 times. It's a great story. 9 times this year.
Coming back to the margin question, we're showing 23% EBITDA margin based on new IFRS standards, and we have no idea what margin.
Presumably Ross and TT.
They don't yet recalculate it, so it's kind of, that's exactly where the issue is.
So
I think
we've added this line of EBITDA.
RAS, right?
And so we should be, when we're thinking about the EBITDA margin and even the EBITDA that will be, that somebody will be valuing, should we be looking at that?
It will be a,
We need to understand what are the kind of.
the multiples in retail industry will be a little bit different once this IFRS will be in full speed. I think we will have full clarity like in first half of 2019 when everybody reports with the new IFRS standards. There will be like a reshuffle. There will be a decrease on EBITDA multiple, yes, on a generally in retail industry, yes. But
the EBITDA will be higher, so.
But the EBITDA will be higher.
It's
On the cash flow, it doesn't make.
It's a pertinent question because we have a valuation discussion.
Yeah.
And we just need to understand whether we're looking at $100 million of 6 billion rubles of EBITDA or 4.4 billion.
Well, this is 6 billion rubles of EBITDA, but the multiple will be different.
So it's not going to be 10 times or 12
It's
times.
not going to be 10 times.
So Ross will be adjusted.
Adjusted for the same IFRS.
Okay.
How fixed prices doing?
Well, from what we discussed middle of last year, there were growth about 12 or 15%, something like year on year, ruble terms.
Remember we had an aggressive idea to merge them with the IPO?
Well, we did. The question is,
This can't have sufficient scale for an IPO. It will be bigger than Детский мир in a couple of years.
Familia standalone?
Standalone. In terms of EBITDA levels.
Ну, у детского мира беда тоже подрастет с этим IFRS раза в 1.5.
Я не про... да.
Там ликвидности все равно в детском мире.
Что достаточно.
Okay.
The questions.
So what's our plan?
So the plan is basically, we have the March discussion with the shareholders where we agree to reanalyze the growth perspectives and the strategy of the business and the new economics of the store. And we're preparing for that, the financials and everything, to have pretty good discussions with the founders about the 2020 numbers and actually second half 2019 numbers. Because the figures you have right now assume a very conservative approach to the openings of a new store, and we agree that we'll reconsider that once we have first quarter in our hands. So once we have that, hopefully we will have a discussion that will lead us to the decision that we have to speed up, embrace the new, whatever, 12-month payback, increase the openings, and get full speed to the next level of the growth. And for us, the question is basically, do we, once we have this discussion, understand all the dynamics, is for us to understand where the exit of this might be. Enrico.
Maybe we should hire Chirachov for Amelia.
It's not a question of management. They can do it. It's all in the heads of the two founders.
Other questions?
Should we take a break now? We finished half of the agenda and we do that, take a coffee break, and then we come back and finish the other half.
Papa John's. So on the market, as we've talked on previous quarter, there was a significant expansion of the number of stores and pizza chain offer in Moscow and in regions in 2018. And Papa John's joined the story, ending up the year with 130 owned restaurant with 6 in Poland. The majority of underperformance, as we discussed, they underperformed the budget quite significantly, and the majority of it, as we discussed, was due to 2 reasons. First, they budgeted the openings happening first half 2018, which didn't happen. And that was like 50% of the issue, and 50% of the issue was cannibalization of old stores, which we should have forecasted. But it basically meant for the old restaurants that they lost. This is a pretty simple business. When you open up a new restaurant, part of the delivery zone just gets away. And this is very mathematical, and that did happen. And that was 50% of the underperformance. So basically, what we see on the market is that there is a demand for the product. The product that Papa John's is having, I think, is quite relevant. The only issue is that we have an offline attitude to the more and more online market of the delivery, which is happening in Moscow region specifically. It is of a lesser issue for the regions, but given where most of our operations are situated in Moscow region and St. Pete, this is a heavy issue for us. What I mean is that we have a very not up to the standards app. We do have a website that crashes when we have a spikes of demand. We do have some very simple issues that might be fixed and would be fixed hopefully in a short period of time. But the speed of openings last year and the team that was doing all of the work was basically, they were being flooded up with the issue of openings, and they didn't follow through with the very ops wise issues such as procuring of the deliveries, making sure the promos are in the right place in the right time, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're having right now and what we focus on in 2019 and the numbers that you're seeing in 19, you assume a very modest openings in 2019, understandably, just given that we kind of pushed the brake on the terms of new equity stores opening before we fix all the ops issues. We think the number should be achievable just given the number of openings in 2018, and we do think that most of the openings are good in terms of coverage of Moscow and coverage of regions in terms of delivery timing. We need to sit down and discuss the financial model in light of the numbers and analysis that we have for 2019 and understand the proper way to for us to basically optimize the long-term potential. That's what we plan to do in first quarter 2019. In terms of the competition, this is the very promo-driven market, and we got a confirmation of that last week when Papa John's did a promo. They kind of do it once a year, twice a year. They did a promo 50% off for everything for a day. And the spike of demand was plus 50-60% of what they usually have in a day. In the evening, it was even more. It was like 2-3x demand for the typical day. For us, it means the demand is there. We're not doing something right with the price offer and the marketing, and we need to figure out the proper offer to the client. Which still keeps the margin for us in terms of the gross margin and, of course, the contribution margin to the store. However, again, from what we see from the demand, I think there is a healthy level of demand for the product. It's not the product that is driving the underperformance. It's not a pizza issue. It's a delivery issue, and it's an execution issue around this pizza. So, and part of this is the management team. Chris understands the issue pretty well. He tries to find the proper people, and unfortunately, there were some people that we found last year, which we thought would be a great add-on to the team. That didn't happen due to the reasons we didn't fully control. One of the guys that we found just got ill. Terminally, unfortunately, but we do believe that there are some positions within the management team that would and should help out the operations in coming 2019. That is the very focus of Chris in this, specifically this half of the year, and hopefully will help out figure out the proper team build up to push up the performance of the team. We also have this promo, pricing, marketing, product discussion coming up in first quarter 2019. That's one of the reasons why Papa John's did this promo for a day, to understand if the thesis about the product is still there and how do they want to tackle it in 2019. There is somewhat of the market niche that we're having in terms of being a bit superior in terms of pricing and premium product, which might be something that is actually driving the consumers from us. And we do have a healthy gross margin, I think, to play around it and to understand that the pricing might be different for some of the products, or for bundles of the product, or for the pricing strategy, I would put it that way, to get more customers. The aggregators are basically, we do work with both of them, Yandex, Еда, and Delivery Club. We, as you remember, had a discussion of being exclusive with one of them, but from what we see in fourth quarter 2018, they fight heavily with the marketing budgets, and there might be a situation where we basically with work with both of them as sales channels, and don't choose one against of the other. There's a discussion. It's a discussion we would have coming Monday. We still want to do Yandex.Eat only with an exclusivity on them as well, or this is like just a aggregators work generally, and Delivery Club is still on track. December was a very healthy month for Delivery Club, and we kind of got a good deal on this aggregator specifically in fourth quarter 2018. There is also a question of Poland, because right now the stores are tracking in line with the St. Pete, generally in line with the St. Pete, with average St. Pete store looks like. We need to understand if the market is there is no sense in keeping 6 stores. We need to develop there fully. If there is no life there for some reason, there is again no sense in keeping 6 stores over there. So there's a question of basically do we speed up the Poland or do we close it for good? And I think we'll have this discussion again, understanding the potential financing needs. But without all of that, in 2019, the key issue, as I've said, is basically getting all the ops issues that were dragging for 2019, just given the focus on the speed of openings, on the development, on the coverage of Moscow. And I think from what we see on December and on January, we have a small but positive dynamics that shows us that we're looking at the exact questions that basically were the issue in 2018. So to sum up, I mean, ops, management, and pricing are something some issues that we will need to be focused on in the coming quarters.
My biggest concern is the market overall and the drop in our effective cannibalization, ours and others.
Can I make some comments, because I met with Chris at the end of the year, so I kind of joined Katya on the project. So if you kind of top down, if you look at the in terms of the market is there, demand is there, and the under-penetration that we saw is still there, despite the fast growth of last year. We are one of the top players, and the market is still fragmented and is still growing in terms of, the market itself is not growing that fast, but there is consolidation that is happening and should happen. What happened over the last year, I think we have clearly overestimated the management capabilities, because what happened, they opened new stores very quickly, and then they underfinanced. So what they did, essentially, they even saved cost on the drivers. So we opened the stores, but then we didn't deliver. It took us, whatever, an hour and a half to deliver pizza, and no one wants a pizza if it's not delivered within 40 minutes. So looking at these numbers and looking at the cannibalization makes no sense, because you essentially, they completely mismanaged last year in terms of the product, in terms of delivery. And so I think on the market side, it's there. The business model is still the pizza business model. We didn't overestimate it, I think it's okay. On the management, we have an issue. I mean, in my opinion, I think Chris is a very strong entrepreneur, and he has a very weak team, and he is now trying to fix the problems that he saw last year. And I think we should try to basically rebuild the management team to make it much more, much more professional, self-sustaining, and not just this hierarchical reporting to Chris. So Chris was in Poland. Chris was doing the PJ International, and he would come to Moscow, make some hasty decisions, and we are dealing with the results. So that's, and I also think that they overstretched in openings, and then they underfunded. Now they're underfunded in terms of basically just to provide sufficient support to the business. That's basically where we are, because we already own the business. We will try to fix it. And in my opinion, the priorities are, and what we also see why we believe the market is there. This promotion showed, and also there were a couple of times over the last year where the demand is actually higher than what they can do. And they had to switch off marketing because they cannot deliver. But for example, with this promotion, they started the promotion, and then they lost the IT. The site overloaded and shut
The website
down.
was down for 2 hours.
And then when I ask about the delivery product, whether customers can track where the pizza delivery guy is, he says that we don't have capital, we don't have money to invest in the courier app, so we won't do this year. We'll do it when we have money. So the whole attitude is not good. But these are kind of management execution problems. These are not nice to have, but these are fixable problems.
So Domino's is not seeing a same-store sales drop.
They do. They do. In Russia, they do.
And the sales drop, why are they opening?
Same-store sales.
Just because they're public, and the only reason why the investors were in the first place, that they are very saturated in Turkey, and they were selling Russia as a high growth story. So when you look at first half 2018 numbers that they showed to the market, it was EBITDA negative of something like minus 10% in Russia, with a promise that it will come back to the positive numbers late 2019.
So then there's no market. Katia, you are kind of, either there is a market and where we have execution issues, or there is no market and everybody's already saturated.
Okay, Dodo has a margin. It's not a question about
So Domino's also has execution issues.
They have a very high execution issues as well. It's a location issue. It's a rent issue. They have too high rent expenses and everything. They have pretty good.
But we may have management issues. That definitely may be the case. But it could also be a market problem as well. So
Where we can deliver, when we have a good product, we have high demand. This is obviously this year we'll need to, and when you open stores and then you don't hire drivers to deliver, that's a very that's a simple problem to fix if you focus on this. And Chris seems to be focused on this. But to me, there's also an issue. I haven't seen really successful businesses with one man store where he controls everything. And this is that's kind of executed. That's this is very geographic.
Our franchisees, are they satisfied? Are they unhappy with the results? There
has not been a closure of franchisee over the last 24 months.
Are we seeing existing franchisees want to open up more stores?
Yes. It's exactly the regional story of, if you look at some 19 numbers, there's plus 50 restaurants and franchisees. Most of them, like 80% of that are their current partners.
I don't eat pizza, but what Chris says, we have the best product, pizza in the market, and Dodo is copying everything. They have people inside us, copying our new products and everything. So it seems to be, I think, high level. There is a question to the business model competition, and there are questions on execution and the management that we need to fix over this year.
But to answer Mike's question, the competition, the pricing promo competition is there. It's not that we don't see it. It's there just because it's there. But it's again, we can we can do a good margin on the promos as well. It's just a question of how do we figure out the best way to market those promos, because right now the approach was pretty standard, I would say, and not really mathematical in terms of how you generate traffic and earn on that traffic.
Well, we grew last year number of stores by increasing our debt. And we're really now kind of maxed out, I would think. I probably wouldn't want to borrow much more given where our cash flow is. So the only growth is going to come from franchisees.
It is the plan within the current plan, but I do believe there should be a discussion where, what Lena says, there are some items that we don't have to postpone just because we're maxed out about that.
I think what I see is Chris actually has cut everything, and obviously the business is now managed in a suboptimal basis, and he's cut everything because he assumed there will be no money and he needs to repay some debt. We need to, because we all own this, we need to look at the numbers and understand what is a healthy model and what is where if we need to invest whatever $1 million or $2 million in this business to stabilize it. The performance that we will need to do it, but I don't understand the financials to say that right now.
That is from IFC?
Yeah?
No, they don't have.
Bank.
They have Russian banks and
The maturity.
PJ Western loan, PJ International loan. Sorry.
The maturity of it, is it any risk? Because actually, we can pay interest, but no repayment at all.
From what we had a very long discussions about that in terms of balancing the bank portfolio. I don't see a big risk in SON 19. And if we do SON 19 in terms of operational performance, there shouldn't be a risk in SON 20.
No, but in 19 we take additional debt.
We don't.
We don't.
Well, it's
to
100
refinance,
now,
only to refinance the existing 100.
and it's contracted
100
already.
more.
Vadim, it's contracted already.
In this year, we opened roughly 55 stores. Do we know how many stores opened Dodos and Domino's?
We do have this data, but there were approximately 50% growth rate. So the number of restaurants in Moscow increased 2.2 times. That's basically one of the reasons for everybody's numbers on the market. Dodo doesn't show up because they do franchise. We don't know how they do it, but in terms of Domino's, what they show in terms of their own restaurants opened up in Moscow, they increased it by, I think, 70 restaurants.
No, something like 57. Yeah, Dodo grew by, I think, 160 last year, but that includes
Regions.
most of those are like franchisees.
And most, like 99% of that is franchise.
How large Dodo is right now? Do you know?
360, I think, restaurants. And in terms of revenue, it doesn't make a lot of sense just because you have this management company,
I
which...
think Dodo's consolidated Russian revenue is like 11.5 billion rubles or something.
But it's including franchise.
That's consolidated revenue of all.
That's ecosystem.
Yeah. Domino's was 4.5 billion in revenue.
They will report in about a week.
Last year.
We'll know for sure.
Did Laili agree to move?
Not yet. Working on that. Unfortunately, she was signed up by UFG to be effectively COO of Caro.
COO, wow.
COO of Caro.
Я из медиабизнеса не уйду.
We'll deal with that. I think.
Other questions?
So we'll do the the detailed analysis of the financials. Come back next quarter with conclusions.
Solar farm, it's page 31.
Circulated consumer and retail yesterday with some corrections in solar farm figures.
Финансов, да?
Да, там съехали линки. Страшные цифры.
Я новое открыл, и там то же самое.
Нет, не может быть.
4275% просто.
В 2019 году.
Ну, нормально, наркотики, такая маржинальность есть.
Медицинская марихуана?
Конечно.
Может, что то же самое, что ли?
Okay, so the company finished 2018 with revenue of 4.7 billion rubles, which is just 5% below our budget, which we prepared in January. Retail revenue slightly outperformed our expectations, while hospitals came lower than our expectations. This is due to overall hospital market decline. We see that in our categories, the market declined on average by 15%. This is due to cut of government spending. This is due to some government initiatives which make auctions more transparent. So that's the situation with hospitals. For next year, the company plans to reach revenue of 7.1 billion rubles. The company believes that the exponential growth rate is over. So currently we have a portfolio, and our plan is to continue increasing our market shares in portfolio which we already have. This is mainly for retail. In hospitals, unfortunately, our portfolio consists of low margin commodity products, and our focus right now is to introduce expensive products to the market. This will be a question. We will start to receive some marketing authorizations this year, and we also have some ideas for next 2 years to enter super expensive hospital drugs. Currently, the company is working on attracting talent, which will do research and development of the drugs, which will control clinical trials, etc. It will take time, roughly 2 years. In terms of cash flow, we still lacking cash. We have high debt of 5.5 billion rubles. We still have 500 million available in Sberbank. Fortunately, we do not have any principal repayments this year. We have to pay just 20 million rubles. In 2020, we have to repay 1.5 billion rubles of Sberbank debt in December. Again, our best case scenario is Sberbank will refinance it, but we should expect that we will have to earn this money before. We also helped the company with some government-related initiatives. As you remember, previously Solar Farm received subsidies on interest rates, and when they refinanced the loan from to Sberbank, they effectively lost their rights to get government subsidies. And the situation is not happened not only to Solar Farm, but to a number of other industry players. Currently, our plan is to make some consortium and to propose to Russian government to bring this money back to us, and moreover, this money are budgeted in Russian government. So hopefully we will do it, and we will save roughly 100 million rubles per year in interest payments. Generally, I would say that Solar Farm has proved its ability to develop brands. Our retail portfolio is strong, and we can increase our market share going forward. In hospitals, we have to introduce expensive drugs, and we have to start making money on hospitals as well. We still have issue with working capital. I believe that the budget which we approved is maybe ambitious on working capital. One potential solution that we have is the sale of our Trecrizan brand, because Trecrizan is a tablet drug, while Solar Farm is focused on liquid drugs. And there are some interested parties which can potentially consider purchasing of Trecrizan. So we decided to take a look at this opportunity. Maybe we will sell Trecrizan before we sell the whole company. We plan to do the analysis in first half of this year, and then we will decide. And of course, if we sell the Krizan, it will be a good price. And if we arrive in a situation with lacking working capital, we will probably, we will definitely solve it with proceeds from the Krizan. So probably that's it. The company, I would say, this is a good company with weak balance sheet. We try to solve our balance sheet problems as much as we can. Everybody is positive, we see market potential. And another question for us is to estimate remaining white space given our recent initiatives to move to expensive drugs. Because as you remember, when we invested, we were expecting that the company will reach 10 to 12 billion rubles of revenue on existing facilities. It seems that we are starting to approach the level of capacity utilization, maximum capacity utilization. Oleg has plans to increase its capacity in case we understand the potential. So we will help the company to quantify the remaining market potential and how much money will it take for us, for example, if it is ever possible to reach 15 or 20 billion rubles of revenue, how much capex should we spend, etc. This is our near-term focus.
Are we limited right now by capacity or by the market?
So far, we think it's by capacity. In retail, our products have maximum 10% market share. Our branded products. When we talk about the Krizan, Linakva, there is still.
Why wouldn't we just cut the hospital segment that's not profitable and just focus on commercial if the market is not a limitation?
No, of course, the market is much more difficult to increase your market share. It's up to even 20%. Vasy is right, so we actually achieved a good result last year, but the situation is still unstable and still risky. And so the good thing that management understands it, because even like 10-20% on the performance is quite significant for the cash flow, might be quite significant for the cash flow. Commercial segment, Vasy is right, is doing much better than we budgeted, but still it takes time. Even although we see the demand and really demand on good product, and we are cost leader, definitely we let the pharmacists to make money on our products, which is actually good, and we see that our market share is increasing, but definitely the competitors don't sleep, and they also try to give some more bonuses to the pharmacists to keep their market share, and this fight we will see this year and next year too, but we cannot increase like market share dramatically immediately. So that will definitely. So it's as Vasy mentioned that it's simultaneously we decrease the share of hospitals and we transfer the capacity to the commercial market and to the high margin hospital market as well, which as Vasy mentioned, that needs to be also proven how can we sell the high margin products to hospitals. It's still in the early stage. So there are risks. What I could add to Vasy's speech, actually, there are a couple of more risks. First, we still have a problem with financial department, and they still, as we believe, don't manage cash flow and working capital properly. So we need to strengthen the team. CFO, of course, he's very loyal and to Oleg, and Oleg believes that he's solving the major issues, but of course he doesn't understand what the real CFO could bring to the business. And it's tough to us simply to replace Pavel right now because he's working with banks and with the whole team, but we put it in our KPI for the next quarter or two to strengthen the financial department, at least at the second level. Let's see what kind of people we could find. Another issue we have here, it's potential risk of retail pharma market, which we believe will have some real troubles this year and next year. We foresee some bankruptcies, and it's very important not to get in the situation with
Of the pharmacies.
of the pharmacies, right? How do most of the players survive? We don't understand, but of course they survive because of the producers, which actually give too much working capital to them, and they don't actually. Pharmacies don't make margin. Most of them don't make any margin, but simply survive on the cash flow. But given the strengthening regulation and let's say tax authorities coming after most of the pharma networks, which actually most of them operate based on gray schemes, based on like individual entrepreneurs. Like you have 600 legal entities within one player. It's so of course definitely it will be sorted out, and few of big players will be bankrupt. What we saw last year, so the company actually pretty good in managing those risks, and they exited from like couple of bad stories right in time, right? Like they decreased the exposure right in time, and they stopped providing goods to them like right at time.
So Pavel is good at the financial.
Actually, I think this is not Pavel, but this is more Sergey. This is more Sergey and Oleg. Sergey, he's responsible for commercial segment. He knows the whole market very well, and he felt the trouble situation. But it might be luck simply. But next year we foresee much more such cases in bankruptcy. So. This is also might be an issue. We have to address it and monitor it very carefully. But yeah, with the bank, with the Sberbank, we have to based on the first half of the year, because the growth is pretty aggressive this year. We will see if they will be in the budget. So we will have to address the Sberbank about refinancing better early than later. Restructure or refinancing. So let's see. It's still in sensitive position now, but we thankfully to the team and to Oleg, we are on track at least.
Obviously, the financials that we have to look at here are not correct on the 2018,
We circulated, you can look at Fund 5 report.
All right, but I think what my point was going to be that we really need to see some cash flow information. That's the most important thing. And obviously we have negative cash flow. So looking at 2019, the good news is obviously the revenue growth last year, if we can maintain that for another year, we should be in good shape. But we're not going to be able to do that without the banks providing additional capital. We won't have the working capital to be able to do it. Right? So do we have a plan about that expectation? Does Oleg have any money he could invest if it was required to do a down round or a working capital shareholder financing or something else?
They already did down round twice.
He doesn't have any money left.
Yeah, he does. He doesn't have. As Vasim mentioned, we still have 500 or even 600 million available facility in Sberbank, and we over the last year we stopped the company to get into this facility, despite the fact that they wanted too much, so we, based on from the budget, we have this year budget fully financed without new agreements with the bank. But as we said, next year, 2020, end of 2020 is quite crucial in terms of paying back the first portion of principal.
But you don't think you'll need additional capital?
We will see it, as I said, we will see it in the middle of this year, based on the performance.
Well, I think we should closely consider the sale of the Krizan, because of course it's our top brand today, but it is a tablet drug, and probably when we will sell the company, strategics will not give.
Let's look at this, because you may to sell what's sellable, and if it's the best asset.
No, actually, it is just an idea. It came during the last meeting. Just an idea to see if the value of Trecrizan separate might be much more than like the value of Trecrizan inside the company when we will be selling it. Yeah, it's just an idea to explore it.
It sounds scary, kind of, to sell your best drug in order to finance working capital. So
No. It's not about financing working capital.
that's the way it sounds.
It would have to be to pay off, significant portion of the debt as well, right? So the Krizan, if it could be sold for, 2 billion, 2.5 billion rubles, then it could be a good deal, right?
I don't know. I don't know what this maybe the fair value of Trecrizan is.
No, of course, if the fair value is not significant for us, we will keep it.
We can easily calculate this exercise, so let's go.
Yes.
And strategically, as Vasya said, it's not within our...
Trecrizan — это миксин орбидол.
Только лучше. Возьми с собой
Это Tamiflu.
иммуномодулятор.
That's fine. Any strategic interest to this company?
To this company, not so far. So far, not. Fresenius is around.
Yeah, Fresenius is around. They said at the end of the year that, sorry guys, we've been busy with some other deals and we're still busy, but we remain interested. So let's discuss kind of next year where you are. But it's not immediate interest that could crystallize in money, over 2019, right? So.
When we talk to Systema about whatever, their pharmaceutical holding, they said that at some point they may be interested to Binopharm и Obolensk.
Definitely, the consolidation on this market will take place definitely within the next few years, and so far it's pretty good positioned in terms of liquid drugs, which is actually pretty unique with high barrier to entry, relatively high barrier to entry. So,
could we achieve these revenue forecasts through 2021 without major capex?
Without Trecrizan.
Without what?
Without major capex. So with our existing facilities.
No, actually, we don't plan big capex here.
They only need some capex to comply with the new regulation on markirovka, right?
But it's 300 million euros.
So if we can change the mix and high grade over time, but otherwise we won't be able to do it.
You see, additional product lines. So we have the major capex is the infrastructure, which we have definitely. So additional product lines cost not so much. It's 100,000 euro, 150,000 euro. So it's one additional line, but we don't need too many of them. So we have existing capacity which can be simply repositioned to more highly valued, high margin drugs instead of current natrichlorid.
Yeah, so we have basically we're still using like third of capacity for basic.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, for the just basic hospital product, which is.
And we keep 70% or 60% of market share in that product.
Yes.
We killed few plants around. Yeah, so we will be exiting from that segment definitely. But we needed it at the first stage to, let's say, to have. Yeah.
Still gives us cash.
Yeah. So I understand the difficulty but and potential risk here. So there's no illusion that we can get into very difficult situation quite easily.
Survived over the last 18 months with minimal investments. I think that's a great achievement. Now we can look at the opportunity.
It's a skin in the game. It's for Oleg. There is no other way to say to fight and not to sleep because he doesn't want to be diluted below controlling stake, and he has no money.
For all of them, it's skin in the game, and some
Yeah.
of them just still make stupid mistakes. and
Yeah,
we-
but
we do it, right?
no, the situation is better. Oleg feels much more relaxed in terms because he was very stressed over the past 3 years. He feels a bit better until the Sberbank starts claiming money back.
Continues to grow and perform. I don't see why Sberbank wouldn't refinance, or we should talk to VTB or any other bank.
Yeah, definitely. He believes that, as Vas said, that we can reach on the existing capacity, we can reach 10, even Oleg believes 12 billion rubles revenue, which is, it should be great, but execution.
I think one of
is
the
a key.
points that will come up like in a year or 18 months is like actually getting the professional CEO, because I think Oleg will get tired of the stress, because he's now like working 6.5 days a week, flying all the time, and he just like might be burnt out. So, and then like also with the sale, the sale is coming up in like 2 years or 3 years, we might as well have like a CEO in place who's not the founder, right?
Will Oleg agree?
I think he will, right? It's just like the issue is like you cannot
He's been mentioning this
in a
himself.
guaranteed manner find the CEO in like 6 months, right? You need to meet a lot of people, right?
No, he's mentioned this.
He mentioned
Oleg has been burned out like for the last like 15 years since Lenta, so it's way of life.
But he made Volvo Ocean Race a couple of times, so he has quite good stress management.
And we're not Costigan, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Use the product. Buy solar farm products in the pharmacies.
Don't get sick, but if
Don't
you
get sick. If you
Трикризан и что там еще у нас?
Linaqua,
Лена.
Angidак,
Еще вот этот
Мистамидин.
мистамидин, да, который совсем не мироместин. Лучше.
Лучше.
Вадим, надо
Потому что он
аптечный
жжется.
киоск.
А?
Аптечный киоск надо внизу организовать.
Так он вообще принес там 3 коробки на Новый год. На кухне все приходили и собирали.
Даже жидкость для вкалывания в суставы, армависком.
Очень серьезно.
У нас
Нужно всем.
Ну, есть у нас тестовые ребята.
А кто тестует?
Other question? Новомед.
Novomed on the market, it seems like, we talked about it the last quarterly meeting. It seems like the board still on the table, but we don't understand quite fully why the timing is still dragging on, because the indicated timing was the end of the year, and the sale to Rosneft didn't happen yet. To remind, this is the sale of Russian assets only. We don't quite fully understand of how the production is being separated, just because the foreign operations are still on the market. But there is a movement down there. On that background, all the Russian tenders are going the way they were going for the last 5 years, which means that for the most oil companies, boards are still independent company. So once and if the deal does happen, we will see some restructure on the Russian market, but let's see how it goes, because right now it's unfortunately very hard to forecast of how this will affect Russian sales of the company. Internationally, there is still the same competition. New tenders and contracts still very sensitive to the oil price, and the 2019 numbers are assumed at around $55-60 per barrel, which is the level we're seeing now. The 2019 numbers assume 40% growth in export and flat Russian sales, which I think in terms of Russia is absolutely okay, but we push the company to achieve higher sales. And in terms of export sales, the contracted percentage of revenue is higher than the previous year, but as we know, unfortunately, with Novomed, some of the tenders got pushed to the next year, rescheduled, So even if they win and if they have a contract in hand, it doesn't mean at all that there will be a revenue or cash flow coming up in the forecasted year. However, so in terms of the 2019 numbers, we do believe it's reasonable to assume they will fulfill 2019 numbers in terms of P&L. The usual and typical question for the guys is management of the working capital and associated debt levels. This is of a lesser issue for us given that we're in exit mode, and to update you on that, there are different tracks that are being discussed right now, with the most realistic one being RDIF wanting to buy a minority stake in the company, up to 30% of the company. They unfortunately cannot go higher than that due to very complex structure of the Saudi fund. Even if Saudi if they do have much more money than that, but they cannot do more than 30. So effectively what we have around 60% of the company that might be sold on the current pricing levels, including our stake, but we only have one buyer for 30% of the company. We discussed yesterday with RDIF on their working group level of how to tackle this issue, given our apparent need of exit. And we agreed on the following strategy. We will look together for an additional buyer for 35% of the company, which will solve the issue of us controlling the stake, them being a part of the deal, and basically the valuation that we're talking about is more or less realistic for the asset we're having and the growth and marginality of that. So we don't think it's too high of a price not to find anybody else. There are some indications. Sorry?
What prices?
It's around 6.5 EBITDA last year. We might think there is a chance to renegotiate on 2019, but it's too early to tell at the moment.
The absolute value.
It's around our cost to be, if we're talking about the, without the minimum return, which I'm not exactly counting in our projection anyhow, because it kind of ends up in November, and in anyhow, I think we'll trade it for something else. For the kolkhoz not to tack to our deal, anything that will make the deal happen in 2019. So there are some indications in the market that there might be interest to join RDIF in this deal. They're too early to say that, it's too early to say whether they're set in stone, but there are some willing parties to look at the asset, which is our plan A, and basically plan A is to merge this RDIF buyer with some RDIF Saudi buyer with some other buyer and make the deal happen as soon as possible. And for us, the trade-off is basically selling all with kolkhoz not tagging, trading the minimum return requirement that we still have up until November for this deal to happen. Because kolkhoz is right now actively trying to tag and ruin the deal, in fact. Plan B for us is also there. Plan B is basically reshuffling. Well, it's a part of plan A in case everything goes smoothly, but I think we have to tackle the management issue, because from what we see, the performance of the company is for the last 18 months at least have been not really up to the standard of where the company might be. So we have to change CEO, but it's a chicken and egg question of us selling the asset, and it's not really a good moment to change the CEO when you are selling to the buyer who's more or less happy with the CEO, it seems. So the question is basically, if we don't have any interest and we don't have any structure for us to exit the company, I think the issue is for us to basically make an appointment. We do have some candidates, pretty good ones, but we didn't get a full run of CEO search, but I think there are some people on the market that might take this asset to the next level, but it's not within our time frame, and it's clearly not a preferred route for us. But it's also a plan B.
I think we should go ahead with the CEO change anyway, because none of these exit options seem very immediate. And if we, the more likely scenario is we're still stuck in this a year from now, and then we'll be saying, I wish we had changed the CEO a year ago, and then we'd at least have some momentum.
Artif is very happy with Maxim. I've really carefully tackled this issue with them yesterday, and they're really, part of the reasons they want to buy is Maxim. So if he would change the guy now, it will
buy us, and then they don't have the problem.
It's exactly what I'm saying. It's exactly what I'm saying. Let's do it quick. Let's find another buyer. We do it in a very high speed mode and do whatever you want with a CEO and that entity. That's part of the issue is that we don't have another buyer for another 30% of the company, which we're trying to find as soon as possible. There are some guys who are saying we want to buy 20% of the company with Artif. But this all comes down to the 50% plus one sale.
What type of people?
Система. Felix, basically.
Taking out the cash from Epsilon to buy Novaman?
I don't care much, actually. As long as we have the...
As long as not from ozone.
Солофарм оставьте еще, да?
Сеги же к Шамолину сходи, забегай.
Well, there are some indications from ESN, from some other guys who are really early to tell they're actually there, but from the pricing levels and from the growth profile, they're saying we really want to have a look, at least the first look. I think that's exactly the strategy we agreed. It's a quick run for the 30% of the company. If we don't find anybody who is actually, going to due diligence stage within 2-3 months, we're basically going to the CEO change and everything goes from there.
Well, I would be, interviewing the candidates and negotiating with
Yes.
people anyway to get them ready.
Yes, that's true. That's
And
true.
I've never seen a situation in 24 years where we regretted moving too fast to change a CEO that we knew needed to be changed.
Even in a sale mode?
It's always, we were afterwards like, we should have done it a year beforehand.
Even in a sale mode?
Max may obstruct the sale. I don't think he's like on our side, highly aligned to achieve
We have
the
some
sale.
lot of he understands what he gains from us exiting, and he gains not being replaced. So it's kind of very clear for him.
Well, I think there are also some longer-term things, if they don't work, that are scenarios with more upside, including mergers with different players that are in different geographic markets, but that similar size to us, like Al Kharaif or whatever, which could be a real positive scenario, unlocking, much more value. But that'll take a couple of years to develop.
At least a couple of years.
But it's good to have long-term opportunities too that would help in our short-term negotiations as well. So my advice would be to change the CEO, start negotiations with Al Kharaif, and immediately test the market through Blinov about any people willing to buy 30% cheaply on a short-term basis and exercise our min dochodnost to increase.
Exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, what we're pushing.
There's no excuse to have a minus 17% in export sales at a time when the international market's picking up. It's a real sign of management poor execution.
Minus 70%
versus last year. Look at the export sales.
Around 20% growth.
Export sales were minus 18% year on year.
Oh, that's
No, it's a mistake.
Oh, it's 10 months, no?
It's 10 months, and in December they sold again, as in the fourth quarter, they sold like a huge amount. So they're in the budget in terms of revenue. They should grow. There was a huge uplift in fourth quarter. So if it's 10 months you're looking at, there is typical Venezuelan contract that was on December. So.
I hope we got paid in cash.
They typically get paid in first quarter next year. That happened for 2 years in a row. I think it happened this year as well.
How realistic is the net income number for 2018 forecast?
With the sale of December, I think that's realistic.
1.4 billion.
It's about 1 billion. Should be something about 1 billion.
But in terms of free cash flow, it's still the same model.
It's still the same mode. It's still the same mode. They invest in working capital, basically. It's zero at best.
But when business will start generating positive free cash flow?
Not in our perspective.
Hope RDIF has a different view, right?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like this is the only deal that they have with the Saudis that both sides agree they want to do. So it seems like at a political level, both sides really want to show some progress. It's still a very small deal, though, right? So given what their appetites or things like that, I just don't understand why they can't step it up from 30% to 60.
If they like Perm, we can add AR Telecom.
From what we hear from
Get it sizable.
For them, it's political to have a minority deal, because that's kind of what was agreed, that they don't do strategic, they do minority deals. I'm not sure that 40 something percent is still technically minority, and we're pushing hard on that, but for now.
That's why the Al Kharaif deal would be a perfect fit.
But it's longer. I mean, we have this timing mismatch between this.
Al Kharaif is a Middle Eastern ESP group that's a big supplier to Saudi Aramco, but they also have a number of other Middle Eastern clients. Most of their manufacturing is in China, but probably their technology is inferior to Novamed's, but they have really good distribution. And they want to do an IPO, but they don't probably have the scale. Their business is more profitable than ours. All the sales are about the same.
Not because of they've got some advantages in technology, because they've got an exclusive relationship with Saudi Arabia.
Well, they have not only, they have the better sales and distribution in general. I think our marketing and distribution is weak.
Yeah.
Technology is great, but the marketing is weak.
Yeah, thank you.
Metalon is page 35. So let's start with a brief overview of operating results. Just recently, company announced 4-quarter operational results, and to be honest, I think that fourth quarter was historically high and exceptionally good for the company. The company reported something like a 30% growth in square meter sales and about 47% in ruble terms, in terms of like year over year, if you compare fourth quarter 2018 to fourth quarter 2017. Cash collections also picked up. So if you look, I mean, like we didn't write about this here, but for the overall 2018 year, the results were, the dynamic was the same. So SQM sales grew something like 23% and in ruble terms 37%. So it was historically the highest year for the company and the best one. On one hand, the company grew on the back of growing market in Moscow and St. Pete areas, which grew on the back of several factors, which I will mention later. On the other hand, the company also grew because we enforced the management team in the end of 2017, and the new management team showed resilient and good results in 2018. So if you look at the market factor, which enabled, all large developers to grow strongly in 2018, because LSR, PIC, and Etalon all grew in line and with double-digit growth of higher than 20%, I guess. In 2018, a deferred demand was realized by all the developers because on the back of volatile macroeconomic environment, changing exchange rates, increasing cost of mortgage, and changing legislation, customers were very prone to acquire real estate, which they were planning like for several years. It's all noted by market experts. In terms of legislation changes, I think that we explained this to you in last times we were reviewing Etalon. I think it's worth noting this again. As far as you know, the DDU is as a sale contract is gradually fading away from the market, as Minstroi and the government is trying to change the law, and effectively in the end of December they changed the law. However, the way they approached this legislation changes created a strong volatility in the market, because each time and each half year they were introducing new changes. They were announcing one group of changes, and in the last hearing they were changing about 20 or 30% of announced changes, not in the benefit for developers. So, for example, in the last readings, as you previously know, developers had a transition year starting from July 1st, 2018 till July 1st, 2019, when they can either choose to launch DDU or escrow accounts. But effectively now it turns out that despite the fact and despite the time when you received the permission to build, you actually have to build under escrow accounts based on some criteria that will be introduced only in February 2019, which again creates a very limited ability of developers to forecast and to launch new sales. So, for example, some developers who launched their projects under DDU rules in the second half of 2018, now it turns out that they have to switch to escrow accounts, which is, so some projects are under strong legislation risk. Etalon, on the other hand, selected a very conservative and careful strategy and didn't launch any projects in the second half of 2018, maybe except for one building. This legislation changes also created a very strong volatility in terms of new land plot acquisition prices. So developers tried to acquire new land prior to 1st July 2018 in order to capture all DDU rules. Etalon didn't do that, and they only acquired one project, I think in August 2018. And now it turned out that it was all senseless and meaningless, and now prices should drop down, and Etalon, with a strong balance sheet, should clearly benefit from this. So overall, Etalon hasn't yet reported the financials for 2018, but from what we know, the free cash flow that Etalon will recognize in 2018 is something like from 15 to 16 billion rubles. The net debt actually turned into net cash of 2.2 billion rubles, and clearly Etalon is a very good candidate for, let's say, market consolidation, because they didn't acquire new projects. They have a very good free cash flow, so now they can leverage up to acquire other projects. So I think that regarding operating performance and financial condition, I mentioned and described all what happened in recent time. Regarding our strategy to exit this investment, our key target is, of course, to exit fully in 2019. And as you all know, we made, I would call it a dual track process. So on one hand, we tried to secure our exit by doing an MBO transaction, but unfortunately in 2018, I wouldn't say it fell apart. It's kind of on the table, and I think this is a plan B in any case, but it's not that hot now. As you all know, our another track was to find a strategic investor, and clearly within an industry there are some companies that were always willing to buy Etalon, because Etalon is a clear market leader in terms of efficiency, cost of construction, and I mean the best reputation. So clearly the first target was LSR, but as you all know, due to subject reasons, Mr. Zelenkov doesn't want to sell his company to Molchanov. And Etalon and Sistema was always on the horizon. So they approached us, I think, 3 or 4 times within the last 2 years. And as you all know from market news, this crystallized in some form of process in the fourth quarter of 2018. So regarding some details, I think Alexei can comment in more details, but overall, I think this is a very good chance for us to exit. However, you should all understand that we as a minority shareholder need a very complex and sophisticated structure to justify our exit. On one hand, on the other hand, Sistema is, Sistema wants to acquire Etalon so much that they're actually willing to, I wouldn't say facilitate, but so they're quite open to our suggestions and desires in this sense. But the whole transaction structure is under development now. So in terms of corporate proceedings, as you may know from the public sources, the company just recently created a special independent committee which will review any new acquisitions. And as you know from our some internal discussions, this potential transaction with Sistema will involve several stage process where actually Etalon first acquires Sistema assets and Sistema buys out majority shareholders. But within this transaction, in terms of corporate documentation and corporate rulings, we need to be very careful to create such a structure that actually justifies our exit. I would say like this. But Sistema again is very open to understand this very well. On the other hand, I would say that we should also note that we are not the second largest shareholder in the company now. East Capital accumulated, I think, close to 10% stake in the company.
A little bit more.
A little bit more now. From my personal opinion, I think it was a little bit reckless from them to do this because they're now trapped in a very low liquidity and low valuation company. But on the other hand, they're so careful that they actually, as we hope, won't create some problems for transaction, as they understand that the only feasible way for them to exit, considering all these mandatory offerings, rulings, and etc., is to actually exit through a joint company. So we just recently met them and try to moderate their expectations. Yeah.
Well, the results of the company are excellent, actually. If you look at their sales results and the cash collection and everything else.
Can I ask about just the numbers? Because I understand the fourth quarter operational KPIs are great, but if you look at 6 months, it's minus 15% on revenues and negative.
Yeah, well, that's, of course, previously we described this. I think that, first of all, you should know that all these negative results in terms of EBITDA and net income, first of all, were due to recognition standards. As you know, the company is recognizing revenue not only based on old rules, well, it's some kind of mix. So first of all, some projects are recognized under old rules.
If you look at comparable numbers, what would be the picture?
Look at the cash flow. $100 million of positive operating cash flow in the first 6 months.
But what do you mean like comparable? Well, it's a little bit hard now to... But actually, the company was planning, well, first of all, we should understand the company itself, in its budget, was planning that 2018, first half year, will be closed with at most zero net income due to recognition standards. They also recognized several one-off transactions, one of which was the write-off of inventory. It's some kind of parkings in development, which was recognized by KPMG as a new requirement. I think that in this sense they a little bit lost the control over the situation. The second one was share-based compensation, which was also recognized as a net loss.
With a falling share price, why would they be such a big...
It wasn't, originally it was minus 1.5 billion or something like that, I don't remember. but eventually they managed to regulate it down to 0.9 billion rubles.
Oh, it's still a significant amount, considering where the share price has been.
Yeah, but this was recognized when the share price was much higher. And it was something like middle of the year, or I don't remember, or June.
I think that the operational performance is good. It's very close to what we expected when we.
Better than we expected.
Yeah, when we last discussed the potential sale, when we thought that we would keep apart and that by 2020, you know, the company should be, we thought, at a fair value of around $1.5 billion, and they're on track with all those numbers, slightly ahead. But I think the situation with Zedenkov has deteriorated dramatically since then. It's not viable. The management situation as a result of that also became conflicted, where the management were trying to buy the shares, and also as a result, it was in their interest to see the share price be lower rather than higher. They had no interest to promote the company's good results. Now we're stuck in a situation where Zedenkov has basically capitulated and wants to sell, and the only buyer ready to buy his stake in full is Sistema.
Yeah.
And Sistema is interested to do it only in a deal where they'll lever up the company and take a lot of cash out. And we think it's not a good transaction for Ethanol shareholders. Not a disaster either, but it's a great deal for Sistema. They get cash out, but they also own a third of a company that's 5 times more valuable than what they own 100% of today. So, net for them, it's a great deal. But ultimately, I think that, from the alternative for us of trying to thwart that, coming up with some other alternative for Zedenkov or whatever, I think our inclination is if we can sell at the same price as Zedenkov, subject to it being a clean deal that doesn't have any reputational issues, that it's probably better to take the money and move on. Even though, in terms of intrinsic value, it's a shame, because if you look at the actual results and, if there was a better shareholder alignment here, I think the intrinsic value should be 3 times what today's market cap is over the next 2 years. But
what is the timing on any potential deal with Sistema?
Mid of the year.
Why not earlier than that?
Not at the same time as Mr. Zedenkov will be second stage of the transaction.
So first they buy out.
Because of his reputational risk, mostly.
What assurance do we have?
From other hand, Sistema seriously afraid mandatory offer. They wouldn't like to exceed the level of 30%, and this is the main reason why we're separating this.
So, well,
What is the risk that they would do a deal with Zedenkov and not buy sell?
let's talk about that separately.
Yeah.
The risk is low, but we can explain why.
Knowing this.
Yeah.
I've got my personal risk, like a member of the board.
Yeah.
Let's discuss it separately.
Other questions?
Did you recirculate? There was not in the original numbers. So.
I did, and Michael, I could find it here, Fund 5 report. It was right up.
So, Kaspi had excellent results last year and has very strong momentum going into this year. So, operationally, in terms of customers, their basic strategy has been not expecting to grow its number of customers. They have about 5 million regular customers. But in obviously a country of 17 million people, they can't really double their customer base. But what they are growing is the number of products per customer and user engagement. So the launch of their mobile app has been very successful. It quickly became the #1 mobile app in Kazakhstan. Now there's approximately 3 million mobile app users, and they use it on average 11 times a month. So it's a very high degree of user engagement, people using it for more and more things, for payments, for shopping. And, essentially the growth strategy for the company is to grow products per customer and wallet share. And they seem on excellent momentum to do that. So they've been conservatively assuming that their consumer finance business will be flat, but it actually also continues to grow due to similar tailwinds that are improving the consumer finance or consumer lending environment in Russia. So cost of funding gradually going down and cost of risk gradually going down. But the company's strategy has been aggressive growth of the other three business segments, which are online lending, which are the online loans that they do in joint venture with Kolesa for online car loans, but also online loans associated with the Kaspi Shop marketplace. Second is the marketplace itself, which are basically merchant fees that comes from all the sellers and merchants in Kaspi Shop, as well as the merchant partners for Kaspi Red, which is their installment loan or installment financing product. And that's both an online and offline. And they get the same merchant fees paid as a percentage of the transaction, whether the transaction happens in the store or online. And there have been a couple of examples where merchants tried to exit the shop in order to not pay the merchant fees, and they saw their sales drop by 20, 30%, and within a month they came back. And so I think it seems like the entry barriers are high, and the customers love the product. The net promoter score of their products across all the categories, it's 70 to 80%, which is really off the charts high compared to even the best, most successful companies like Amazon or others in the world. So it seems like it's sustainable, and they have a lot of momentum for growth. In the three kind of new business areas, the growth's been around 100% year on year. And they really do think that they can, double or triple in those in the next couple of years. In terms of looking at their financials and P&L, the effect of the growth of all these other areas is that the business is becoming more diversified. So in terms of net profits, now we just have net revenue, but we obviously have the net profits figures as well by business segment. And what it shows by next year or 2021 at the latest, the majority of the profits will be from areas outside of the retail banking and consumer finance business. So it's good for overall diversification and also for the company's potential valuation.
Any negative news?
We're aligned fully with Misha and Slava about going for an IPO. That's not something which 2 years ago was a guarantee or a certainty. It's a huge headache, especially for Misha. Misha is kind of he's obviously a charismatic leader, but he's a micromanager by nature. And so being a micromanager while you're leading this bank and ecosystem while also micromanaging an IPO, it's really overwhelming for Misha. I mean, he's working now like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he's driving, a lot of the engagement with the banks. Obviously, Yuri is super important for that whole process, but Misha's like, writing the prospectus himself, and, he's really, and it's great that he's aligned to do it, but it's not something that's really sustainable. So, but hopefully, everybody seems to be pushing towards an IPO in Q2 of this year. So, we should be ready from a legal and regulatory perspective to do it. The initial meetings with institutional investors have been very positive. The feedback was, very positive. Main questions that people are asking, basically in Kazakhstan's history of corporate governance, disasters, what confidence can people get this isn't going to be another corporate governance story in Kazakhstan. I think there are lots of different questions about the business, but it seems like that people are very enthusiastic about the business model itself and about Misha. Very, very impressed with Misha. His presentation is, his energy about the story and everything else came across very positively. So Kazakhstan, Central Asia, I think that Misha is also now starting to pivot more towards really thinking more concretely about the rest of Central Asia, which is something we've actually been talking about for some time. And so, you know, now he's also talking about Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, what are we going to do concretely? Now they have a mobile app and mobile first strategy. I think they have an entry strategy towards those markets that's lighter and easier than it would be otherwise, starting with payments and e-wallet and terminal network or things like that that may not even require licensing. But the strategy would be to enter those markets with a consumer finance and payments focused first, so doing cash loans, and then eventually developing joint venture products together with Kalesa, which is also expanding into Uzbekistan for car loans and trying to develop a marketplace. Some of the biggest merchant partners of Kaspi and Kazakhstan are also players in Uzbekistan, so they're pushing Kaspi to also try to develop the same marketplace in Uzbekistan that they do in Kazakhstan. So I think that's a longer term thing. Right now, Misha has no bandwidth for it. I think one of the key priorities should be really, there's a very strong senior management team, you know, Pasha Mironov, who's really, he's become the CEO of the bank. Misha is the CEO of the holding, and his bank is a big part of it, but, you know, Misha is looking at all the other businesses too. Pasha is a super strong guy. Tengiz, who's the CFO, is also a very strong guy. But I think we, you know, making a priority of developing the next, you know, 100 people and having long-term incentives, that's one of the priorities, I think, for this year. So clearly, I think, you know, in terms of risks, the IPO process in the best of circumstances is very distracting for management, and it's doubly distracting when you have a management where so much is concentrated on Misha and the kind of key man risk associated with him. So obviously, the sooner it can happen, the better. I think after it happens, hopefully Misha would exhale a little bit and kind of think about taking the business, you know, to the next level. So they do have a 5-year plan that's Kazakhstan only, existing products only, that grows to $1 billion of net profit. So within the next 4 years, it was, you know, 5 years starting last year. And it's based on pretty conservative assumptions in terms of, you know, assuming interest rates, interest expense goes up, cost of risk goes up, you know, declining unit economics, even though there's no sign of that happening on the horizon. So I think that, you know, that together with, you know, geographic expansion or whatever, I think that this could be something that Misha would see as really something over the next 5 years he could take to become a business that's much more valuable. We're also, so we've expanded the IPO syndicate. It was Morgan Stanley and UBS as the two global coordinators. We've decided to add Goldman Sachs as a third global coordinator and RenCap as a book runner. So we may add one more book runner, but that's the kind of the base syndicate. The analyst presentations are going to be on February 5th in Almaty. That's pretty key to get the kind of pre-IPO research done. More rounds of pilot fishing and kind of early look investor meetings happening in second half of February. We're kind of working backwards from a expected mid-March date of an intention to file, in which case the draft prospectus would be made public.
How RenCap can get into such a big company?
What?
How RenCap is actually...
RenCap is
alongside with...
Yeah, they're not a global coordinator. They're a book runner, so they're not really managing the process. But they have good macro research, and they have good research generally. And they're more of a frontier markets people. So they've been out, you know, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, UBS. Well, UBS maybe, but Goldman and Morgan Stanley, you know, absolutely no interest in Kazakhstan. They're not like, you know, out talking to investors about Kazakhstan or whatever. UBS does have some, you know, interest in Central Asia because they're kind of a second-tier player, and so. But RenCap for them, you know, they're looking for anything they can do. So they've been doing frontier markets research, pitching Central Asia and stuff like that for the last few years. So I think that as a component of the syndicate. anchor and cornerstone investors. So, we had retained also Morgan Stanley last year to work on a potential pre-IPO private placement, which was focused mainly on strategic type investors, people like Alibaba, Tencent, and SoftBank, and people like that. No response from Tencent. SoftBank said no. But Alibaba and Ant Financial are interested, and especially Ant Financial. So I think they've decided that it would be an investment by Ant Financial. They're also quite slow, but what we've kind of decided is that they're going to be too slow to do a pre-IPO private placement, but it's still possible that they could become an anchor investor or a cornerstone investor in the IPO. So they've also said that they want to look at it together with CITIC, which is a state-owned Chinese investment company that's has a big diversified portfolio of investments in businesses, and they seem to be keen to do it. And they're visiting Almaty for a deep dive session with management around the 20th of February. I think on the current time frame, it seems to me, so there's that group of potential anchor investors or cornerstones, and there's another group that includes EBRD and China's Silk Road Fund, which are both also very interested and want to do, for EBRD especially, this should be like the, in the CIS, there's, it's probably, since they can't invest in Russia, this is probably the #1 kind of high quality opportunity of 2019, and I think they seem to be very motivated to want to be associated with it. So I think that both with EBRD, Silk Road, but also with Ant Financial and CITIC, it seems unlikely that they would be able to be in a position to make a commitment by the end of March, which is the time frame we would need it if we're planning to do an April IPO. So we'll be then in a situation where we'll see what kind of demand we have from the early look and pilot fishing meetings with institutional investors, and if we could go ahead and do a IPO in April without anchor investors, then of course we would do it. But the more likely scenario is we'll have good feedback from those investors, but we'll feel like it would be that much more successful in an IPO if we could also have, $300 or $400 million of anchor investment from people like Ant Financial or Silk Road, EBRD. It's also good names that would provide other investors confidence. So in which case we'd be talking about delaying the IPO by a couple months, but trying to solidify it by putting the anchor investors together. So those would be good quality problems to have. First, we need to get, we need to make sure we're going ahead full speed with all the IPO preparation anyway. And we need to get kind of bids or indications of interest from the anchor investors anyway. They may not be there. I think that another scenario is that we do the IPO without them, but we think about negotiating during the lockup period with people like Ant and CITIC, and we do a big post-lockup sell down after 6 months after the IPO to them, which would also be another not bad scenario.
Mike, it's pretty well known in Kazakhstan that Kaspi goes to IPO now.
Not really. I mean, it's not.
I mean, do we need to get the blessing from the local national bank? And,
yeah, we've already told the national bank, and they're very positive about it. I think it'll be great for Kazakh's banking sector.
Any local forces, local groups who could be against it?
No, obviously it would be people who would be jealous, that they don't own a stake in the company. But so we have.
They can buy it on IPO, right?
We have bought out K2. This was really, necessary, even to sign mandates with the global coordinators. We couldn't do that with him as a shareholder. So Morgan Stanley and UBS were just like, nothing to get personal, but there's just no way we can sign a mandate with a company that's partly owned by president's relative or whatever. And so, but also I think he didn't really want to be a shareholder in a public company either. So this has been also one of the potential sources of instability among the shareholders. and trying to get, alignment. What we've agreed, in principle, we didn't want to borrow money from the fund to buy out K2, especially borrowing money if that obligation would be in dollars or something like that. So what I said and what we agreed with Slava and Misha is that we were okay to allocate our share of dividends together with them to buy out shares. If we did that at an approximately $2 billion valuation for Kaspi, which is slightly higher than where the funds value it, but it's well below what we expect the IPO price to be. And the rest, Slava and Misha have bought. They basically have a note to K2. They also borrowed some money in the market, but they have a note to K2 for the rest. And what we've agreed is that they can have, in the IPO itself, obviously, on that portion that they've increased their shares, they'll be able to retire most of the debt that they have, assuming that the IPO happens. And if the IPO doesn't happen and we end up, it gets delayed, let's say till 2020, and then there's another dividend, then we can discuss whether we participate with them, in buying out additional shares, in which case we would increase our stake. The net result, though, of the allocation of the dividends from last year is that we've increased our stake. So I'm not sure, Gadi, if these numbers
This is
reflected.
based on coup reserve. So whether 5%.
This here is 30. This shows 33.9%, but actually we now own 40% of the company.
Yeah, this is because of the coup reserve. You see, there is a separate line.
Separate coup reserve. Yeah. So what is the coup reserve? This is in Kazakhstan. There's a requirement for any bank to have at least a 10% shareholder who is approved by the National Bank as a krupny участник. And without having a krupny участник, no bank can take deposits or, yes. So Slava and Misha both want to have liquidity like we do as fast as possible, selling as much as they can as fast as possible. What we've agreed is that we'll be selling pro rata in the IPO and selling pro rata after the IPO to the extent there's lockups expire. And I think that's good. Obviously, the fact that Misha's be selling pro rata together with us is why he's so motivated. He's doing a great job of both pushing the IPO fast and also selling it at a high price. And so I think that's a smart and fair and logical move. But they've made the point that we should also lock up a portion of our shares together with them to be part of this krupny участник reserve. And so we've agreed to that in principle. So out of our 40% stake, roughly 35% would be able to sell, in the IPO. And as soon as the IPO lockup expires, 5% would be subject to a longer-term lockup. So we will be we'll be all trying to negotiate a waiver with the National Bank for the krupny участник requirements. Pardon me?
Well, we keep it forever?
Well, we'll be locked up until we can get a waiver basically from the krupny участник reserve. So we think there's a good chance that we can do it because the circumstances and reasons why it would be required shouldn't apply to Kaspi once it's public and owned by reputable international institutions. Obviously, if Ant Financial or somebody like that becomes a 10% shareholder,
they would be the coup reserve.
They could become a krupny участник. Obviously, the requirement though is if it's a foreign company, they need to have a credit rating, and they need to have a credit rating that's higher than the sovereign credit rating of Kazakhstan. So I don't know if Ant Financial actually has a credit rating. If it's higher than the sovereign rating of Kazakhstan, it should be. But so there's 2 or 3 different paths we can go down to try to work on it. But the bottom line is it's also a very emotional point for Misha, who I think very sensitive if he feels like he's doing all the work, but we get out first and then he's left having to have shares that he can't sell or something else like that. So I think that one way or another, there'll be a way to work it out. We've built in, we haven't actually signed the Krupny Участник agreement yet, so we're still negotiating. I'm trying to put a long stop date on it that's out there, final. Misha doesn't want to have a long stop date at all. But ultimately, we've also put in, of course, that we can sell or transfer to an affiliate at any time, right? So if it comes that we haven't been able to do it, we're in a time we need to liquidate Fund 3, we can transfer to a, Fund 3 successor vehicle or something else like that. So we have the ability to do that, but we've increased our stake as a result of these buybacks anyway, so even without that, our stake is higher than what we had at September 30th. And
there's management also we shared, right?
yes, there was a management dilution we've agreed that was also part of the change in shareholding, that there was some exit bonuses that were agreed and also a long-term incentive plan that we've agreed to convert into shares for the management.
John, did you say that we've agreed also to sell down after the lockup pro rata with Misha and Slava?
Well, if they want to sell it together with us, then we would do it pro rata, right? So.
Okay, but we could sell if we wanted to.
Most likely they're not, my guess is that after they've had a big cash out, they probably won't be as rushing to sell at the same time after the lockup expires, so we'll be selling before then. But yeah, just overall, I think maintaining an alignment and a kind of a pro rata approach is a smart, healthy thing instead of thinking we can be clever and get out faster. Because I think that right now, Misha especially Slava is basically not really involved. I mean, he was worried and under the pressure of the K2 situation, but now that that's been sorted out, he's very happy and for Misha, I think is the key to the whole IPO and the post-IPO, story and everything else. So maintaining a full alignment there, pro rata, I think is a smart move from our perspective. Will result in a higher exit proceeds for us.
At the IPO, that totally makes sense. And if he cashes out, he's going to have $1 billion position.
Yeah, no, if he doesn't want to sell afterwards, or if we desire to sell before that he would want to, then we can be free to do it after the normal IPO lockup expires.
Okay, I just wanted to understand if you had made some agreements with him or not, because we'll be in year 14 if I'm agreeing.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Start. Good luck.
Смотрим.
Тут еще Катя.
Да нет, я не знаю, колеса будем обсуждать.
Have a meeting in 20 minutes of valuations.
Did you want to say something about колеса?
I can say a couple of words. So last year was really great. So the company increased its revenues by 120% year on year. And had revenues of 20 million, EBITDA margin was 60%, so 12 million EBITDA. Growth mainly was driven by checked by Caroso projects, so basically this cooperation with Kaspi, and it was driven by a number of loans issued by Kaspi, but also by increase in commission from 2 to 5%. So this was the first part of the year, and in the second part, actually, the company started to focus more on traditional revenue stream for classified projects, value-added services, and these segments for Krisha and Caroso started to grow much faster. So in December, for both projects, I think the revenue growth in this segment was about 100% year on year, and this is a very positive sign for 2019. So in 2019, we expect that the growth of check by Caroso will be gradually slowing down because the base is pretty high already. But the company's growth will be supported by the growth of value-added services. Another major development is as Mike mentioned, was entry into Uzbekistan is the auto segment. So far, it's too early to say about the potential of this market, but obviously it's a huge country by the number of people, and it's growing now, and it's opening up to the world. So this is mainly about
You want to mix any general comments or?
Obviously, we have a lot of work ahead of us in 2019. I think just one request on the information. There have been significant changes in some companies with regard to the financials. And now it's challenging because the financials are not comparable. So let's focus on, to make sure that we can look at the numbers. And for the investments, please check the financials of the portfolio companies when you do your write-up.
Yeah, it's not Katya's. Katya doesn't own all of those numbers. Each of you own each of your company's numbers.
But it's very difficult to follow because the numbers, you shouldn't look at the numbers because they are not comparable and that's not helpful.
So please give some thought to the numbers which are presented here so they're useful for discussion.
I also wanted to say that this time as well was very challenging to produce the reports so everyone could see them in advance of the meeting to make it meaningful discussion for a lot of last minute changes. Because this data has to go to database and it takes time to get them into the database. And Katya had to work with Nazgul on getting numbers to make sure that all the figures here make sense. So that leads to some of the mistakes because they have to do it very quickly, copy and paste in Excel instead of database because it takes time and then you see a lot of mistakes. And we would like to ask if it's possible maybe the day before the circulation, if there are any changes asked, we cannot do it. So it has to be all done in advance. And the same with
numbers of the write-ups for both.
There are both. There are issues on numbers on one side, right? And then on write-ups, what Katya and Oksana found that write-ups numbers did not match with financials provided by the team. So Oksana and Katya had to verify and come back to each team member why there is a difference as well. So the ownership of the numbers are really important here.
Yeah, guys, there are 40 portfolio companies, and if it's a small change for you, you have to put it in the context of if 38 companies have small changes. So just have a little bit of understanding of the big picture, please.
Is it possible with write-ups to be on time as well somehow? This time
the next time we show who was the last one with.
Let's put in a place it's like, $500 fine for anybody who's late.
Who was the last one?
Let's do it seriously. Seriously. If you're late, and I will pay $500, and I'm late too, but it's let's just make it, not $1 million, but it should be like should be sizable enough for everybody that you feel like, oof, that was,
I think it's not just,
we'll do that again.
It's not just, I think we should announce it. It doesn't matter what the amount is because obviously there are. Whatever Nazgul sent around on Friday, deadline on Friday, there was from May 20, it was one write-up ready.
So totally ignored. So we're trying to push it to Monday to give people more time. As a result, received on Tuesday, most of them. So we will put probably for the future Friday. It means a Friday sign-off. So the team has time over the weekend to work on and ask if there are questions. But
$500 if it's late, $1,000 if it's a day late, then $5,000 if it's 3 days late or whatever. So we can see.
Just announce these three last, so it's not the very last one because everyone would be monitoring, but it's the last three. We basically show it on the screen.
Charge everyone the fine. That would be very motivating to do the work in time.
If everybody in the company would have to pay a fine if one person's late. Maybe that's what we'll do next time, but let's start with 500 personally and then.